Good evening and welcome to the Village Board meeting for the Village of Pleasantville. Today is Monday, March 10. If you are watching live on Monday, March 10, we encourage you to call in if you have comments or questions. Our call-in number is 769-1677. As always, you can watch on cable TV, Verizon Channel 39, or Cablevision Channel 78, live webcast at pctv76.com. And within a couple of days of the meeting, the on-demand webcast will also be up and available at pctv76.com. Our next work session is a week from today, Monday, March 17 at 7 p.m. And our next regular meeting is scheduled for 2 weeks from now, Monday, March 24 at 8 p.m. with a work session at 7. A couple of announcements to make, one of which is that the village elections are taking place on Tuesday, March 18. Voting will take place here at Village Hall in this room on the second floor boardroom between noon and 9 p.m. That is a shorter voting period than in some years because the election is uncontested. There are 2 board positions up. Mindy and Brian's positions terms are up. Mindy is running for re-election. Brian is retiring, a well-deserved retirement. And Steve Lord, who's here in the audience tonight, is the other candidate. So there are 2 candidates for 2 spots, but you should still vote on Tuesday, March 18, here at Village Hall, 12 p.m. to 9 p.m. A couple of other announcements to make. Our farm market continues to go on, going great at the middle school cafeteria during the winter. Opens up at 9 on Saturday. We encourage you to get up there and visit it. And I also wanted to mention that I just noticed yesterday we spent some time talking about the activities that go on in Pleasantville, in particular its profile as a performing arts community. And yesterday, on a Sunday in the middle of winter, we had going on at the same time the high school performance of South Pacific, which I encourage you to sign on to get tickets for at phsplay.org. They have 2 more performances on Friday and Saturday. It's really a community event as well as a school event and well worth your time. At the same time, Shostakovich and Ravel were being played at the Pleasantville Chamber Music Society concert at the Presbyterian Church, free to the public. Into the Woods was being rehearsed 2 blocks further down the hill at our new ARC stages. For performances that will be going on in April, and the Burns was attracting people to 3 different screens. So for a community of less than 2 square miles on a Saturday in the winter, I'd say we're doing okay. So thanks to all those organizations for doing the great work they do. Anybody else have anything to report?
Well, if you're giving out accolades, we have 2 of our swimmers in Pleasantville that were Pleasantville swim team. One is still an active member and one is an alum. Our alum, Ruan Zorgman, went to ECACs, which is a Division I conference champs, and he got the silver medal in two events, the 100 breast and the 200 breast, and he happened to break 2 Binghamton records as a freshman in a Division I school. Go Ruan. And then our other swimmer is the lead, James McCarthy, in the play at the high school. So got some pretty multi-talented swimmers.
That's for sure. All right, congratulations to all. So the big event tonight, and the reason we have a full house, is that we have a public hearing tonight. Is there a motion to open the public hearing on the local law amending Chapter 185 zoning to add a new Article 6A entitled Eldercare Community Floating District, the benchmark senior living zoning petition?
So
Second. All in favor? Aye. The public hearing is open. Let me just set it in context a little bit. As you know, the 5 members of this board have been engaged with all of you and with the applicant for well over a year now on a project that proposes to build an 80-unit senior assisted living project on the wooded parcel just north of the Methodist Church. The parcel is currently owned by the Methodist Church, and Benchmark Senior Living of Wellesley, Massachusetts is in contingent contract to buy that, pending approval of a zoning change that would make that possible. There is a long and a detailed record of both the discussions we've had with the community and with people on both sides of the issue. as well as a very big stack of documents supplied by the applicant, both to fulfill the requirements of the State Environmental Quality Review Act and also in response to questions the board has asked and members of the community has asked. We are represented on our side by Susan Favate of BFJ Planning, who has been part of this the whole way along, and BFJ has also engaged a number of consultants, particularly Hudson Engineering, as well as some economic consultants, to vet the submissions of the applicant and to provide advice to this board. And then Joel Sachs, our village counsel, has served in a similar capacity reviewing the legal aspects of it. So we arrive at this point at the public hearing, which is a required piece of the process. The board does not intend to vote on this tonight. It's our intention to hear what people have to say and to add to the record whatever comments people want to make. I can report that we have a number of communications that will be part of the record. Over the last couple of weeks, we received 90 emails or letters in favor of the project and 57 emails or letters opposed to the project. Many of those are in similar form, reflecting the circulation of proposed text, which is perfectly fine. So it's our intention, obviously, to add whatever comments are made tonight to the public record, and it's our intention also, although we will close the formal hearing tonight, to leave the record open for one more week, and I'll remind everybody of this at the end, but we intend to leave the written record open for one more week until 8 p.m. on Tuesday the 17th for any further written comments that anybody might wish to add to the record. Pending what we may hear tonight, it's our preliminary intention to vote on this matter in 2 weeks on the 24th. It certainly is our belief, again, pending whatever may be brought up tonight, that we have the information we need in order to assess this request for zoning change, and that has been ratified by the view of our professional consultants who are here to advise us. And it's also our view that the five of us who have studied this for the past more than a year ought to be the ones to vote on it, as opposed to the board that will be seated on April 7th when Brian leaves and Steve arrives, assuming that is the result of the uncontested election. But obviously, if information should arise that needs further review, we will take that time to review it. So that's our preliminary plan. Let me also read into the record two documents that we received both today. We are required by the regulations, as well as by good judgment, to refer the proposed zoning amendment both to our own planning commission and also to the county planning board. We have a letter from Russ Klein, chairman of the Pleasantville Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission, that reads as follows: Petition from Benchmark Senior Living, referral to the Board of Trustees, from the Board of Trustees regarding change in zoning designation applicable to property North 70 Bedford Road. It reads as follows: the above captioned matter was recently referred to the Planning Commission for review and comment. In response to your board's request, the Planning Commission reviewed and discussed the proposal at its meeting of February 12, 2014. David Cooper, Esquire, was present at our February 12, 2014 meeting to elaborate upon the proposal and respond to questions from the commissioners. Based on our review and discussion, the commissioners have no objections to the proposed zoning text amendment and zoning map change. If you have questions or would like to discuss the Planning Commission's observations and comments in more detail, don't hesitate to contact me. That's from Russ Klein and the Pleasantville Planning Commission. We received today two letters, an original letter and then a follow-up from the Westchester Planning Department that read as follows. The first one, addressed to Patty Dwyer, regarding referral file PLV 14-003, Benchmark Assisted Living Zoning Text Amendment. Dear Ms. Dwyer, the Westchester County Planning Board has received a proposed amendment to the village zoning ordinance. As proposed, the text amendment would create a new Eldercare community floating district that could be applied village-wide to parcels meeting certain locational criteria. The EC district is intended to permit and regulate specialized senior housing, such as assisted living facilities within the village. The proposed EC district regulations are part of a petition by Benchmark Senior Living to develop a 3.9-acre site, which is currently zoned Triple R one-family district with a 4-story, 87-unit assisted living facility. The site would be subdivided from a 5.6-acre site owned by the Pleasantville Methodist Church. The church, which would remain on its own lot, is located on the northeast corner of Bedford Road. The proposed assisted living facility would be constructed on the northern portion of the site, which is currently wooded. While this facility would have a separate driveway with a new curb cut onto Bedford Road, it would be connected to the church building via a new sidewalk. An additional sidewalk would be constructed in front of the church to the intersection from Bedford Road and Maple Hill. The assisted living facility would feature parking for 58 vehicles. We previously reviewed this matter under the provisions of Section 239 L, M, and N of the General Municipal Law and Section 277.61 of the County Administrative Code, and responded to the village in a letter dated March 25, 2013, in response to the Board of Trustees' declaration to serve as lead agency. At the time, since site plans were provided, we made a number of site-specific comments which we encourage the village to continue to consider. At this time, we offer the following comments on the zoning text amendment. 1. Consistency with local plans and policies. The creation of a new eldercare community floating zone could potentially allow for assisted living facilities to be constructed in several locations throughout the village. We recommend that the village identify sites that may meet the proposed locational criteria and consider these sites in the context of the village's current plans and policies. 2. Fair and affordable housing, development of affordable AFFH units. As per the village's zoning requirements regarding fair and affordable housing, 10% of the units in multifamily developments of 10 or more units are to be designated as affordable AFFH units. It is our understanding that this would also be the case for any developments constructed with an Eldercare community floating zone. We note that the affordable AFFH requirements of the Village of Scarsdale recently resulted in a set-aside of affordable AFFH units at the Ambassador at Scarsdale Assisted Senior Living Facility, and that these units qualify as eligible units under the housing settlement. More on that in a moment. 3. Residency preferences. The proposed floating zone regulations contain provisions that require priority be given to current Pleasantville residents over non-residents for all market rate units. This is an unusual requirement on market rate units that we have not seen in similar ordinances in place in Westchester. We note that under the county's model ordinance provisions, local residency preferences are not to be applied to affordable AFFH units. Thank you for calling this matter to our attention. Respectfully, Westchester County Planning Board, for Ed Burrows, Commissioner. I called Commissioner Burrows today when we received this letter to discuss further his point number 2 about affordable units. It has been our expectation through this process that this project would not be required to have a 10% set aside for affordable units for several reasons. Our definition of a dwelling unit in our code requires a fully equipped unit. In the case of the proposed benchmark project, the units have refrigerators and microwaves, am I right, but no stoves. And meals are provided communally at the dining room. So it is not a fully equipped apartment. Further, because the cost of living there is only partly related to rent for the actual space and very significantly related to the 24/7 services as well as your food, support, transportation, etc., it's hard to see how an affordable unit could be constructed to separate all of those various factors. I had that discussion with Commissioner Burrows. He agreed with that reasoning and sent the follow-up letter. Dear Ms. Dwyer, I'm writing as a follow-up to the letter I sent to you today on behalf of Westchester County Planning Board. In the letter, the County Planning Board provides comments on the potential inclusion of fair and affordable housing units that affirmatively further fair housing within an assisted living facility. While the inclusion of such units would be welcome, the Board recognizes that the operational, service, and physical residence characteristics of each particular assisted living facility may make the inclusion of affordable units difficult or impossible based on financing. The target age and health status for residents may also create limitations on the ability of an operator to provide subsidized units. It is within this context that the board encouraged the village to consider the feasibility of inclusion of affordable units and to create a record for its decision on whether such units can or cannot be included. So now that I have put everyone to sleep with that, but have read it into the record, if the applicant would like to say anything for starters, welcome.
You put that on the website too.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. David Steinmetz from the law firm of Zarin and Steinmetz, representing the applicant. I will try to be fairly brief. Mr. Mayor, you did a good job of summarizing why we were here. I just want to clarify one thing. A few times you referred to the amendment to the code and the proposal for a new eldercare zone. I also want to remind the board and make sure the record is clear that we're also here technically tonight for a public hearing on the map change as well. So we're actually conducting a joint public hearing proposing text for the village's zoning ordinance, and we're also conducting a public hearing to place that onto this property.
And Joel, are you comfortable that we've covered that?
Joel, the
David suggests that we're here not only for the zoning amendment, but also the map amendment.
That's correct.
That was not noted in our opening of the public hearing. Is that a flaw that requires correction?
No.
Okay, fine.
So, as the mayor indicated, we are here on behalf of Benchmark Senior Living in connection with those two aspects, and we are here to undertake a public hearing in connection with an 87 unit. I think, Mr. Mayor, at one point you mentioned 80. I want the record to be clear.
Yes, thank you.
The application is for an 87-unit assisted living facility located on the Pleasantville Methodist Church property. You did indicate 3.9 acres at 70 Bedford Road. With me this evening, as he has been throughout the entire process, Mr. Bill Cook, the project manager for Benchmark, Anthony Guccione, one of our project engineers from John Meyer Consulting, and my partner, David Cooper. Benchmark, as the board, I think, realizes, and the public should be aware, Benchmark currently operates over 40 assisted living and senior living facilities throughout the region. Benchmark is not presently in Westchester County and is rather excited to enter the Westchester market, and that's why we've been before the village for this amount of time, spending this amount of energy to craft something. We submitted a petition to create this new zoning district, as the mayor indicated, I think something like 15 months ago, maybe even a little bit longer, and specifically to remap a portion of the north end of the church property, which was finalized at 3.9 acres. And the village does have an indication of specifically where that is. The 15-month process that we've been going through is essentially a process that's mandated by the state called the secret process. And I know there's a lot of people who have been here literally for every meeting. There are a number of you who are new to tonight's meeting, so that the record is clear. The Board of Trustees declared itself lead agency under SECRA. SECRA stands for the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act, SEQRA. And the board determined under SECRA to conduct a comprehensive environmental, socioeconomic, and planning analysis. We submitted materials, site plans, demographic reports, indicating the need for assisted living both locally and regionally, a fiscal analysis analyzing the impact of the village, the community in terms of a revenue standpoint. We spent a fair amount of time talking about value to neighboring property owners and how that would be impacted. And the county made mention, and Mr. Burrows may not have realized, that your board specifically asked us to provide you with a map of where else this particular zone could attach to were it to be adopted. So the village does have empirical data of the various sites in the village that could potentially ultimately find themselves in an elder care district. We proposed the elder care district as a floating zone. The floating zone is essentially a name for a zone that comes into an existing zoning ordinance and then, based upon the legislative discretion of your board, could be utilized in any number of places if specific criteria are satisfied. Just procedurally, we conducted a meeting with the neighbors before we ever even filed an application back in November of 2012. We then came before your board on December 3rd, 2012, and conducted what we call a pre-submission meeting. We came in and talked about this before we actually formally kicked off. We then came in On February 11th, where we discussed, we submitted our petition. February 27th and March 13th, we conducted meetings with your Planning Commission. You referred the matter, as the mayor indicated, to your Planning Commission for study and comment. We appeared at those two meetings before the Planning Commission. We came in the summer on July 22nd, and we conducted a rather extensive visual analysis and assessment with some computer-generated imaging. John Meyer Consulting presented that. In August, we were asked to come back and present that analysis with winter views to make sure that your board had a full analysis and expose of what the site might look like. You may recall in September, we came back in September, and one of the neighbors and his son made a rather extensive presentation of fiscal and economic impact, as well as a visual counter presentation. We responded to that. There was a meeting in October where there were more comments that came in from the public, again about a fiscal impact to the village, and you asked us to come back with more empirical data and study the economics. We came back on December 2nd with Mr. John Burns of Hudson Property Advisors. We presented a fiscal analysis at that time in a joint work session between your board and the Planning Commission. The essence of that report was to take data from both Pleasantville and elsewhere and analyze what the impact would be upon property values in the surrounding area. That was submitted both in writing and in a presentation by Mr. Burns. We came back in January and responded to some of the visual issues, the aesthetic concerns that had been raised by some of the neighbors, and we presented and explained some of the changes that had taken place in the design. And actually, before I forget, I did hear Mr. Burrows in his letter state an error. It is not a 4-story building that is before the county and the village. As you all know, and as I think the members of the public who have followed this carefully, it's actually a 3-story building. That was January 6th of this year. January 13th, we came in and answered some questions that BFJ, your planning consultants, had asked, again on the fiscal analysis. And on January 13th, your board issued what's called a negative declaration under the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act. It was a rather lengthy written analysis that you are required to do by SECRA before you can proceed with an action. You took a hard look at the issues, you identified the issues, you analyzed potential mitigation, and you ultimately concluded, quote, that there was no significant adverse environmental impact associated with the proposed Eldercare zone as drafted, the map changes as requested, and the conceptual site plan that had been presented to you. So briefly, let's just talk about the evolution of the project. The project has always been basically between 85 and 90 units from its inception, but we originally came in with a 50-foot tall 4-story building. There was a tremendous amount of comment that was received by the public, and the building was reduced to 3 stories and 39 feet. Likewise, we originally came in and Benchmark was suggesting a connection, a physical vehicular connection to Maple Hill Road through the church parking lot. We heard concerns about that articulated by the community at the first meeting we had before we even submitted the application. We then heard similar concerns raised by your board and by the Planning Commission, and I'm pleased to say that the applicants spent a fair amount of time and energy with the New York State Department of Transportation, got themselves and their professionals comfortable with the fact that an interconnection to Bedford Road could be made. We modified the application to eliminate the vehicular connection to Maple Hill, and we offered that as a voluntary restriction on the site, and it was incorporated into your negative declaration. There is no connection to Maple Hill any longer. We reduced, or I should say we modified the half-mile minimum separation distance between EC district parcels. Your Planning Commission had suggested that we impose a limitation or a restriction on how many EC parcels there could be and how close they could be to one another. Your Planning Commission specifically asked us to modify it to a 1/2 mile restriction. We did that. Likewise, they also suggested, and you had commented on this as well, that we ensure that the EC zone only be floated on properties that are within fairly close proximity to commercial areas. We agreed to a restriction reducing the distance to a 1/4 mile to commercial areas. There is a requirement, as we said, of a connection to the state or county road. Here, a direct connection. We also included additional landscape buffering between our parking areas and our lot line. We spent a fair amount of time, somewhere in the middle of the process, discussing fire access. There was concern about whether or not fire engines and emergency first responders would be able to gain easy access to the site, the building, and obviously residents there. We met with your fire district, with your fire commissioner, and we made changes to promote fire access to the rear. We also, there was some concerns raised about where folks who might take the bus to this facility, who might work here, where they would be getting on and off the Beeline bus system. And we secured Westchester County's consent to relocate that bus stop somewhat closer to the site. I'm also pleased to say that our experts determined that there would unquestionably be a net fiscal benefit, economic benefit to the village. There obviously are no school children associated with this. No one knows precisely what the taxes will be until your tax assessor and the town tax assessor arrive at a final assessment. Reliable projections indicate that we're looking at somewhere between $400,000 to $425,000 annually to the village. Excuse me, to all taxing authorities. This is the first advertised formal public hearing, and it may be the first time that you're hearing from a larger range of folks here in the community. Those of us who have been here know that although you have not formally opened a public hearing until tonight, and the mayor knows I referred to this in jest at an earlier meeting, I don't think I've been to any meeting here in Pleasantville that wasn't essentially a public hearing, because you have opened the floor to the public in a very open and deliberative fashion throughout the process. And though the applicant obviously experienced a longer duration of public comment as a result, I think it made for a more productive process, both in terms of interplay with the community and for you to learn what the community had to say. The interesting thing, and the mayor kind of took some of my thunder, up until tonight, we all know, those of us who have been here for 15, 16 meetings, that every night there have been a consistent core group of neighbors who have come out, voiced their opinion, and substantially, for the most part, have been in opposition. That's not that unusual when we process land use applications. Folks come out in opposition. It's a little harder and rarer to see folks come and in one way or another support something. I was pleased. I learned the mayor actually has a higher number, so maybe some more letters have come in. I had heard that you had received 40 to 70 letters of support. In support of the text amendment, and in support of assisted living on this property. And just to quote a few things that I actually was able to receive by email, one of our neighbors immediately to the north on Summit Place indicated that assisted living, quote, is a necessary and valuable resource that will, quote, provide various opportunities for seniors to continue to be a part of the community. Another resident across the street on Bedford Road, assisted living is, quote, a great asset to the village. The design will, quote, raise the quality bar for future commercial projects and generate, quote, sorely needed tax dollars. Another resident above our site to the east on Highview Terrace indicated that the project would provide fiscal benefit to the village. And my understanding is that there are a number of businesses that have actually surfaced and indicated support for the project. I know that there are folks here tonight who, as they have throughout every night of the process, will express their concerns. On behalf of my client, I can say that we're pleased that those segments of the community that sometimes find it more difficult to come out and voice their opinions, because it's always harder to come to the microphone on an application like this and say that you're in support of something. I'm glad that they've surfaced. I'm glad that the field is essentially balanced and that other voices have been heard. The most important point is that the empirical data has been supplied to the village. The record is complete. We're quite comfortable with that. We're very pleased with the amount of time and study that you put in before adopting the negative declaration. We look forward to hearing comments tonight. I know Mr. Cook wants to make a very brief 1-minute statement, and we're here, Mr. Mayor and members of the board, to listen patiently to the community once again.
Thank you.
Bill?
Good evening again. As David indicated, my name is Bill Cook, and I'm the project manager with Benchmark, and I've been here from the beginning. Although I have to say, when hearing David sum up 15 months worth of work in about 35 seconds or so was fairly impressive. It seemed like a lot more work to me to get to this point, and the reason I'd like to hear is I know it was a lot more work for your board, your consultants, and your staff. So I, on behalf of Benchmark, would truly like to thank you for your professionalism and your thoroughness throughout the entire process. Thank you for your effort and your dedication to researching and working, as David said, to truly work into every detail and in the end come up with where we are tonight. And I'd just like to conclude by thanking you very much for that and reiterate what David had said a moment ago, that we are very excited by the opportunities that Pleasantville presents to us. Thank you.
So there are lots of folks here tonight. If everybody could try to be as succinct as they can be. We are here to hear what everyone has to say. I know that Yuri has a presentation that involves the projector. Do you want to do that first, Yuri? Okay, so welcome all. Just state your name and address for the record.
I'm Bill Stoller of 69 Maple Hill Road, and as Sarah Palin might put it, I can see Benchmark from my house. But before I get to what I was going to say, and I might actually just say this part and come back later on something else, it was not clear to me, I don't know why it's clear to Mr. Steinmetz and to your counsel and to you guys, that this is a public hearing both for the zoning text amendment and the map change, because the notice that we were sent reads, please be advised the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville will hold a public hearing for Monday, March 10th, 2014, 8 p.m. prevailing time, Village Hall, 80 Wheeler Avenue, Pleasantville, New York, to hear comments as it pertains to a local law amending Chapter 185 zoning to add a new article, like I said, 6A, entitled Eldercare EC Floating District as follows, and then it lists that. There is no mention in the public notice that this is also a hearing for the map change. So I don't understand, I'm not an attorney, I don't understand how it is possible to hold a public hearing for something that has not been given notification to not only the village, but especially to those of us who were within that certain radius of the property. Could you please explain that to me somewhat?
Because the zoning petition from day one has encompassed both a proposed text amendment. I'm just telling you.
But it's not in here.
The zoning amendment includes both a text amendment and a map change, and everybody here who has been to all the meetings knows that there is a specific geographic area that is the subject of the proposed map change. So
Mr.
we're
Sachs,
not
would
here
you please
just
tell me what paragraph and sentence in this document refers to the map change?
it refers to the proposed zoning amendment.
But this floating district, okay, can be placed, and I know it's restrictive, it's designed, it's written by Mr. Steinmetz or his associates. It's designed to be placed on the church property. That's the way it's designed. But as we've discussed several times, once you have this district, it is possible, potentially, to place it in other places in the village, whether it's one place or two places. So the business of the map change for this specific site is not part of this public hearing as announced.
So you stated your position on that. Understood. To be clear to all, it's our intention to discuss tonight both these items. And let's do that. If you think it's a fatal flaw and that presents you an opportunity, so be it.
I think if you're going to have a public hearing on two different things.
No, I understand what you're saying.
You should
Fine.
be, I mean.
You're not unclear about what we're here for. What we're here for is to talk about this floating zone and its potential application to the Methodist Church site.
Right.
So, go ahead.
Okay.
Well,
You have to come up to it.
your moment will come, I promise.
Your moment
Just
will
hold your
come.
thought.
Your moment will come.
Go ahead.
Your moment will come. Well, I was going to say, as far as Mr. Steinmetz being so happy that you've received all these emails, I think he said 90 in favor and
90 in favor, 57 against so far.
opposed so far.
Again, the record remains open.
The record remains open, and we will be presenting you with additional names. I
Fine,
believe it's
fine,
190 or 200 that are
Yep.
opposed, and there may be more people here who are opposed.
Okay.
So that part of the book isn't closed. I will say that I asked you a question at a hearing some time ago, not a formal public hearing like this, but one of our many discussions that we've had. And I asked very clearly, why? What is it about this proposal that the village seems to find enticing? Because to those of us who've been through all these 14 or 15 different meetings that have been held, it's been very apparent to us that at the end of this process, whether it's 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now, or wherever it is, that this board is going to vote, possibly unanimously, maybe we'll get lucky, it'll be 4-1, in favor of this zoning change and the map issue. And we don't understand why. We don't understand what this brings to the village of Pleasantville, except a 3-story, I think it's about 30,000 square foot building located in a wholly residential neighborhood where nothing like this exists. This is not near a commercial district, or at least it's not near a commercial district of this density. The thing that's closest to is the Old Village, and we all know what the Old Village looks like. They're rather small buildings. Nothing is more than 2 stories. Well, I wouldn't say nothing more than 2 stories tall, but nothing is this size. We've yet to hear what benefit this brings. Now, in the statement of intent and objectives that was written again by Mr. Steinmetz and his associates, and I got to say, you know, that when we hear about in Washington lobbyists writing laws, we all get outraged. But when the attorney for a proposal writes the local law, this seems to be okay because, well, that's just the way it's done. And I don't think that's right. This is all his.
Bill, go to your stuff for a minute.
You stop me all the time.
I'd be happy not to if you'd like to continue.
I would. You guys stop me one more time. This is it. How's that?
You don't get to decide.
Okay.
You keep going. I'll hold my comment.
No. Say what you want to say.
Thanks. I'll
say
wait.
what you want to
Go
say.
ahead.
You'll say what you want to say. Okay. So that just bothers me. That's just a little thing that bothers me. Okay. I understand why it's done. I don't particularly care for it. But when you do that, it allows them to put in things like that this is to revitalize the village's business districts. This isn't part of the village business district. Put in a sentence that it can bolster the local economy through daytime patronage of local businesses in these areas. And we have discussed this before. The average age of the people who are going to be in this assisted living, by Benchmark's own count, the average age of the people in these facilities is 85 or older. That's how old the people are who are in assisted living. By definition, those who are in assisted living need help. They can't perform their daily tasks. Some need help getting out of bed or getting dressed or getting washed, eating, whatever. They can't live on their own. And that's why they are in the assisted living. And it just seems to really to defy belief that many of these people are going to be leaving the assisted living to go and patronize local businesses in any great number. Not only because of their health and their age, Benchmark says they provided extra parking, but most people don't have cars. They're talking about, you know, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. I'm sorry. I usually don't lose my train of thought, but my train has left the track for a second. I don't see that these people are going to be leaving the facility because the facility provides everything for them. Not only are there beds, not only is there communal dining, there are recreational activities. There are televisions they can watch. There'll probably be movie presentations. They'll be probably bringing in entertainers. There's health. Usually all these facilities have some sort of a health care, maybe physical therapy, occupational therapy, a nurse or a doctor who's occasionally on site. There's no reason really for these people to leave, and many of them are not going to be able to leave. Very few of them are going to be able to drive. So I don't see them getting their canes and their walkers and their wheelchairs or whatever they need to be mobile and be going to a lot of local businesses. I don't see that this is going to really impact local businesses in any major way. Might these people order in Chinese food or a pizza occasionally? Yeah. but that's not going to make a really big difference for the businesses in Pleasantville. And if they think it's going to, well, I think they're sadly mistaken. The only other benefit for the village of Pleasantville would seem to be property taxes. That's the only other benefit. And Mr. Steinmetz has said that the estimate, when the place is fully operational in a couple of years, is somewhere between $415,000 and $425,000 a year in total taxes, of which maybe $100,000 would go to the village, maybe $250 would go to the school district, and the rest would go to the town and the county and the various little taxing districts that exist in the area. That's really not much money for what you're asking to be done. You're asking to take a neighborhood, a totally residential neighborhood, single-family homes only on that side of Bedford Road, single-family homes and Foxwood, which is a very low-key multifamily development, on the other side, and insert a 30,000 square foot, 39-foot tall, 3-story commercial facility with a parking and an entrance and everything else. It's out of place, and so the question has to be asked continuously, why? What justifies this kind of a change? Now, if you approve this, there's another part. Nowhere in the village before has this idea of a floating district or a floating zone ever been proposed or approved. When you do this, should you do this, and I'm very afraid you're going to do it. And by the way, if you're not going to do it, please have the ambulance corps on standby, because Mr. Steinmetz is probably going to pass out if you guys vote no. But should you do this, you're opening the door, in a sense. You're opening the door to the next developer, maybe not of an Eldercare facility, but of something else, using the same zoning, I guess I'd call it a maneuver, to override existing zoning and put something else in its place that wasn't originally planned for, that the neighbors didn't originally believe would ever be there. Now, it might not be in the same location, it might not have the same restrictions of being on a county road and being so many thousand feet or so many miles away from something else, but you're opening the door for the next person to come in and say to the village board, it may not be all 5 of you, well, it certainly won't be one of you, it may not be the 4 of you and the 5 of you, it may be 2, 3, 4 years down the road, where someone comes in and says, hey, we'd like to do this. We have an idea, something we'd like to build, and it's really not zoned for it, but hey, how about we doing a floating zone for this use that we can do? And that's kind of opening up a danger of additional commercial development in the village of Pleasantville. The village of Pleasantville, by its own definition, by words in the master plan and the way we all understand it, is a small, basically residential village. That's what we bought into. That's why we moved here. That's why we stay here. Because it is a different kind of place than a Mount Kisco with its big commercial areas. It's a different kind of place than the city of White Plains. It's a different kind of place than almost any other Westchester area you can think of. We pay a premium, and we know we pay a premium to have a village as opposed to being part of a larger town. We pay a premium in our taxes because we have our own police force, because we have our own sanitation, because we have our own public works, and all the other facilities and services that the village provides that we might not get if we were just another part of the town of Mount Pleasant. We pay for the privilege also of having a village board that gets to decide these issues on a narrower context than a town board might when it comes to zoning decisions. That's what we know. And it seems to me, and I know that there are people who agree with me because I've received emails, I've talked to people over these past months, that to do what is being proposed to be done here, to put a large commercial facility in a residential neighborhood in Pleasantville, fundamentally changes what Pleasantville is. it changes it from being that primarily single-family and small multifamily community to something else. Yes, is there some business in Pleasantville, commercial business? The knife people are coming in down the road. There are some printing businesses, some other businesses, but they're kind of tucked away in a different part of Pleasantville, away from most of the residences. This is something that's being put really in a prime part of the residential part of the village. And when you do that, you change the nature of Pleasantville. It's not going to be the same Pleasantville when you put this in. Now, I know they're proposing to do a very good job of hiding it, of putting up borders, plantings, all sorts of things. But part of the way they do that is they have to dig into the hill. They have to do some blasting. Mere yards from people's houses. I mean, I don't know how many yards it is, 100 yards, 50 yards, 200 yards. It's not very far. But they're going to dig in the hill and sort of sink this below the grade of the hill so it's flat. And so it'll be harder to see from up on the hill. And they're going to have some trees up and things, so it's going to be a little harder to see from the road. But whether you see it clearly or not, it's there. It's there. It's different than the rest of the village. You're doing something to a residential part of the village that no one has ever done before. No one has ever put a large commercial facility in a wholly residential part of Pleasantville. And that makes Pleasantville not Pleasantville. And I think that the board should be thinking long and thinking hard about whether the few $100,000 this is going to generate in continuing taxes, and I understand there'll be some construction fees up front, so there'll be one big drop of money when they first get started because it's a steel and concrete construction and it requires expensive permits. But I think the board should be thinking long and hard about whether, for lack of a better term, the price is right. Whether what we're going to get in terms of tax revenues, because that's the only benefit that I see coming from here, is worth it to change the nature of Pleasantville for the foreseeable future and open up the door to even more changes going forward. Who's to say what's going to happen with the rest of the Methodist Church property or other properties where some developer buys up a bunch of residential properties along 117 or along Broadway or wherever they buy them and say, I want to build a hotel, I want to build an apartment building, I want to put up some other kind of a business that technically isn't allowed here, but I'd like a floating zone. Is that the kind of Pleasantville that we want to live in? And that's up to the five of you, what kind of Pleasantville we're going to live in. And I just want to back up 1 second, train went off the track, as I said. As far as benefits, I was talking about benefits to local businesses. This is not going to be an economic benefit for Pleasantville in terms of jobs, because I think it's 100 or so people who are going to be employed here over all the shifts here. Most of those people are going to be on the lower end of the wage scale. They're going to be not home health aides, they're going to be health aides. They're going to be kitchen and dining room help. They're going to be cleaning people, maintenance people, perhaps some security guards. That'll be the bulk of the employees, and the bulk of those employees are not going to be coming from the village of Pleasantville. That's not the kind of housing we have. We don't have those people here. I'm not making a statement about where they are, who they are, but we all know they're not Pleasantville residents primarily. Yes, there will be some managerial and professional positions, a manager, someone to handle the money, a nurse, a doctor, physical therapy, occupational therapy, director of recreation or something like that. Maybe fewer than a dozen of those. But most of the jobs are going to be these other jobs. And they're not going to be directly benefiting Pleasantville. Those people will come here, they'll go to their job, they'll come off the bus, or they'll drive their own car, and they'll park, and they'll do their shift, and they'll go home. Will they be patronizing Pleasantville businesses? Maybe, from time to time, but it's not going to be a major increase. No one can expect that. These people aren't making that much money. they're not going to be lining up for expensive meals at the Iron Horse. It's just not going to be. So the total picture here, the economic benefit to Pleasantville, not great. The change you're making to the nature of the village is great. When you weigh those two, I think, many of the people in this room think, my neighbors think, the scale tips to saying no. And I hope that enough of you agree with me and vote that way on March 24th or whatever day the vote is taken. Your question, sir.
It's not really a question, it's just, and we're here to hear what all of you have to say. I thank you for that recap of comments you've made in the past, but...
Well, this is a public hearing, so I get to say them again.
The one piece I did want to respond to is, and we've had a version of this conversation many times.
I'm sure we have.
You suggest that, I think that you used the term the fox guarding the hen house.
No, I don't think I've ever
in the
used that term.
context of the applicant providing a proposed zoning amendment. And I've told you a lot of times, and I tell you again, that we don't sit here writing zoning on behalf of people to say, hey, is this what you're asking for? They write it because they're asking for it.
Right.
It comes to us, and we can accept it as is, we can reject it as is, we can modify it multiple times and ultimately accept it or reject it. You've got 5 members of your community who sit here on a near volunteer basis and have some collective 1,000 or 2 hours into this. You've got professional staff people who've done the same. You've got our paid professionals who work for us but are funded by, are paid for by the applicant. Also doing due diligence on stacks of material, as you well know, all of which is on the website. You can go get it. So you imply that we're here as the puppets of an applicant.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I
think,
do
what am I
not
doing?
imply. Peter, that is the last thing I was implying.
Okay.
What I was saying was that the language of this is wholly written by the applicant. Yes, there have been some changes over the past 14, 15 months.
Because
Yes.
Okay,
But
thanks.
but
Enough said.
but the language is there. But then again, when we did the
Yeah.
environmental review, and there was a document in front of you, again, that was wholly written by the applicant, you guys, after you heard from them, and actually, I don't think, Mr., I don't think you spoke at that
I think
environmental hearing.
enough said on this. It's gonna be a long
He spoke,
night.
and you
It's a long-
guys voted for it without further
It's
comment.
going to be a long night. So
But that's not my primary point.
point is made.
Not
You've made your
my
points. I
primary
appreciate
point.
it. Well spoken.
Not my primary point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you want to
Who's next?
do yours? Or?
Come on. Welcome.
Good evening.
Just pull the mic down closer to you.
So you can, we can hear, everybody can hear you.
Good evening. Good evening to the board.
Welcome. You didn't bring the dogs?
I didn't bring the dogs today, sorry.
All right.
One would have loved to come, believe me. My name is Lois Somer, and I live in 68 Pleasantville Road. I've been a resident for almost 50 years here in Pleasantville, and I am a member, yes, of the Methodist Church for almost 50 years. We all know that Pleasantville has been losing for decades friends, neighbors who want to stay and to remember parts of the community. Many, if not most, would have used a senior assistant facility to be able to maintain their health and stay in town. When residents are focused to leave, they are sad to leave. They have to give up their friends, and they are saddened, and their friends are saddened by their departures. Sometimes they don't see anybody or ever hear from people here again. Now this is an opportunity for us to solve a serious problem. We don't have to take what we are saying to people who have lived decades here and then say to them, you can't contribute. We can also help them by giving them a place to stay and live. Are we saying that now that you are somewhat limited by age and that you need some personal care, that you are not important enough or any longer for us to provide a safe way and a safe place for you to stay? Please, think about this. Think what you would like to do if you were in their position. And I want you to know that I support this project and our seniors. I am a senior citizen. So I really want to say to all of you, thank you for listening. Think about what I said, and God bless you.
Well, I'm really glad I'm here. I'm Lois LaRusso. I live on 36 Summit Place. The first thing this gentleman said was a lie. I was never notified. My property abuts the property that's in question. And when I heard about this meeting tonight, I called Mr. Testa, and I said, Mr. Testa, there's a right-of-way behind my property that my family has used. My kids made a birdhouse, and they made all kinds of things. My husband had a little farm back there. We've used that property for the 40 years or whatever that we've been here. What's going to happen? And he said, you're being premature. We have not decided on anything yet. The mapping will be done later. I'm confused.
So,
I do have this wonderful right-of-way. It's about 10 feet. It's not a big piece of property. It's certainly not something I want to sell to anybody, but it would give us a little bit of a buffer, and it belongs to us, does not belong to the Methodist Church any longer because we've used it for all those years, and I was never asked to look at a map. I have no consultation regarding a map. And then I'm told tonight that we're going to vote, or you're going to vote, or something on...
nobody's
I'm very
voting
confused.
tonight. Nobody's voting tonight.
Okay, but you will eventually do something
Eventually,
about
we
it?
will.
We will
So,
look at that piece of property?
You're asserting that you own a piece of property because of longstanding use?
Yes.
And that you have acquired it as a result, the church no longer owns
It's
it?
a right-of-way.
Okay, so...
It was a road at one
So
point.
if you are asserting ownership of a piece of property that the church thinks it owns...
I don't know if the church thinks it owns it. I don't know anything. I'm just saying that when I called Mr. Testa and asked, he told me this would not be discussed tonight, that tonight they were talking about something else, and now I hear that, yes, it is being discussed, it's being included, and I'm confused.
What's being discussed tonight, certainly our intention is to discuss the idea of enacting the floating zone for an eldercare and an eldercare zoning amendment.
And you will
it
not be
would-
doing anything about mapping?
And it would apply,
Uh-huh.
based on the applicant's request, if approved, to the site, that north wooded parcel of the Methodist Church. So if you think you own a piece of property that may be in dispute,
Right.
then you should bring that to everyone's attention, including the Methodist
I
Church.
tried to. And I was told that I was premature.
No.
That was
It's
not going to be
It's not the
discussed.
village's job to fight it out
Okay.
between you and the church.
Okay.
The church currently owns that site. Benchmark does not own it. True? Yes. So the church is the owner of the site. If you think you own a piece of property that you think they may think they own, you need to contact them.
Okay.
And you should do it right away.
Who would I contact, do you know?
I don't know who to contact. But-
Because I spoke to
Yeah.
Mr. Testa, and he said this was too soon. Okay,
Well, it's certainly not too soon if you are claiming some
Yeah,
piece of property
right.
is yours.
okay.
Oh, quick tape change. Time out. He has to change the tape in order to meet.
Okay.
Welcome back. Sorry for that brief
Okay.
break. But before you go on,
Many years
could I ask you to stop 1 second?
Okay.
Judy reports, the call-in number 769-1677, we're having a hard time balancing people on the phone and people at the podium. So
Okay.
if I can ask all those people who are at home watching and want to call in to wait, and when we finish with the speakers here in the room, we'll report, now is the time to call in. Does that work? Is that going to work better, Judy?
Yeah, once all the speakers are finished,
Okay.
then we'll close back down.
Our intent is to stay here as long as we need to, if everyone get their moment.
I
Okay,
think
go
that's
ahead.
wonderful that people are calling it. Many years ago, with a young family, we looked for a location where there would be only residential homes. We were assured that this area was protected by zoning laws. This area would not change. It would stay residential. The area was protected. Is the lure of money changing things? A commercial facility would pay taxes. The protection we have enjoyed is in danger. The assurance we received when we bought our home may or may not be honored. This is a walking school district. Children living in this area walk to school, giving them the needed exercise before and after school. My 5 children benefited from the experience, and I admit they walked through the Methodist Church property. As a teacher in Pleasantville, I appreciated the exercise these children got. With increased traffic, would this be impacted? I doubt the impact of our young children sashaying to school was factored in when traffic studies were made. You know how I and others would really like you to vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to clear up 2 procedural things. One, because you asked the question, if Ms. LaRusso has an issue of title or of concern, it really is a private matter. The church has assured us that what she's talking about is probably beyond the boundaries of what we're discussing this evening, but I'd be more than happy, ma'am, to receive a phone call from you. I did give her my contact information, and between the church's lawyer and our firm, we'll try to sort through that private matter. Procedurally, I just want to go back to the beginning, to Mr. Stoller's comment. If tonight's hearing was not noticed as a map change hearing, none of us, I don't think the village, I don't think the applicant and the public need there to be any concern about whether or not there was proper notice. We thought tonight was noticed as a map change as well. There's no reason that map change hearing cannot be re-noticed and conducted as a procedural issue on the 24th. So I don't want that to worry you to say otherwise. Quite frankly, I don't want you to tell the public that they can't speak about Benchmark and the church property tonight. That would be silly. We're all here.
To the contrary, I encourage everyone to speak on
Precisely.
whatever subject.
So if there's a procedural error in the notice, or not even an error, but something that can be clarified, we're more than happy to entertain that. I don't want anyone to get hung up on that. And the last thing I want after 15 months is for anyone to have a concern about the record here.
All right, so we'll confer with Joel on that
We can
subject,
deal with
but
that at the end.
certainly the discussion tonight is about the zoning change and its possible application to the Methodist Church site as requested by Benchmark. So,
Good evening, Monica Strobel, 66 Maple Hill. Many of us are disturbed by the feeling of duplicity on the part of the board. It seems that the board does not want all village residents to be made aware of this critical zoning and map change. In the past, the Board of Trustees made every effort to place all documents provided by Benchmark on the homepage of the village's website for public review. But when it came down to the notice of the floating zone public hearing date and time, it was not posted on the village's homepage. Instead, you had to dig into the meeting agenda to find it. Where is the forthrightness? It does not exist. Where is the transparency? It does not exist. The board would like you to believe that this floating zone will only impact a few whiny neighbors surrounding the church property. Residents who, although purchased their homes in a residentially zoned neighborhood and have dutifully paid taxes to the village, are now expected to just suck it up and give in and get over it. They're wrong. This floating zone and the subsequent assisted living facility not only impacts the many surrounding neighborhoods, it negatively impacts the entire village. It negatively impacts you. This is only the beginning. What's next? How about the church itself? It's only a matter of time, and the face of Pleasantville will become unrecognizable. On March 1st, 2013, Mayor Scheer gave an interview to the Wall Street Journal entitled, "Pleasantville Keeps Its Walking Shoes On." He stated, "It is certainly important to us to sustain a commercial base and a strong downtown." The article continues, "Yet," he says, "he and others are committed to maintaining Pleasantville as a small residential community. The village," he says, "draws young families because of its small town feel, as well as its proximity to New York City and cultural offerings. We are currently living in a small residential community, but the board wants to turn our neighborhoods into something else. Think about it for a moment. Michael's Tavern can't have outdoor seating past 10 p.m. The Old Village gas station pumps cannot be lit past 10 p.m. How does it then make sense that a 24/7 commercial building of this magnitude be allowed to exist in our small residential community? It doesn't make sense, and it's deplorable. This facility is not in keeping with the character of our village. We moved into our neighborhoods knowing that big development was prohibited according to the zoning laws of the village. We have invested our time and money into our homes and properties, and we deserve to have our quality of life left intact and our neighborhoods respected. Is this the legacy you want to leave behind?
I just want to respond to one piece of that, which was the assertion that we are duplicitous. We've been, as you have heard, discussing this with all of you and with the applicant for well over a year, and at every, I think literally every meeting we've ever had, work session, public session, whatever, we have invited and sought comment. I've done at least 2, maybe 3 PCTV shows highlighting these issues and encouraging comment. We accept call-ins, we accept emails. I have myself, as Bill will report, facilitated the connecting of people who are opposed to this to the organized group that has been opposed to it. So I just, it leaves me a little bit saddened to think that those efforts are perceived as duplicitous. So you got 5 members of your community who are sitting here who are trying to come to an appropriate answer to this question. And as we said a long time ago at the outset of all of this, it's our hope and certainly my goal that whatever comes of it, whatever the decision is, people who like the decision or don't like the decision will believe they had a part in the discussion, believe they were heard, and understand how the decision came about. So whether you accept that or not, I don't know. Duplicitous, we sure are not. So who's next? Sure.
Mr. Mayor, Board of Trustees, I would think after 15 months, the public hearing for the zoning amendment would have deserved to be on your homepage. And so I would hope that you could understand the disappointment that many of us felt when it wasn't, and that many of the people here tonight are here because we reached out to let them know about this evening.
Just like I did. So.
And so, not to get into an argument, but as a 36-year resident here, having been through this process along with everyone else, feeling that we are really not being heard, I'm letting you know what our feelings are.
I hear
they
you.
are our feelings,
and
they cannot be discounted. Thank you.
I'm not discounting. Who's next? You ready to go? Okay.
So before I start, thank you.
Can you just plug in again? Do you need Shane again or not?
No, I'll be
Okay.
in a second. First of all, Mr. Mayor, Board, thank you very much for taking the time.
Just
I
your
hope
name and address for the record.
My name is Yuri Paraschak. I live at 45 Maple Hill.
Thanks.
I'd like to ask the board individually a question. What do you think, in 1 or 2 sentences, or however much you want to speak about this, are the pros and cons of this
Yuri,
particular
we're
proposal?
here to hear what you all have to say.
No. I'm asking you a question, Mr. Mayor, and the board. Are you going to say you don't want to answer it? Is that the case?
I'm going to say that.
Okay, you heard that.
That doesn't mean we won't. We're here in a listening mode.
So, what does that mean you won't?
I said it doesn't mean we won't.
So when will
I assure you that each of us will individually share our views to the extent that we wish when the time comes to do so. As we
I'm
have
asking
done
you
along
a
the
question,
way.
not a
So
view, a point. What do you think are the pros and cons of this particular facility?
We're here to hear from you, and we encourage you
And
to...
I'm asking you a question, Mr. Mayor and
And
board.
Yuri, we're here to hear from you. We're in a hearing. It's an opportunity for you to put your
Well, you
opinions
saw
on the
what's
record.
happening. The other thing I was a bit surprised at, Mr.
Jerry,
Mayor.
why don't you, let's
Yeah,
not be
Brian.
insulting.
I'm not
All
being
right?
insulting.
You are
I'm being quite
insulting.
clear. I'm
You
sorry,
know,
Mr. Scott.
the 5 of
I
us
am
are on
not.
this board. You have no idea how we are all standing on this.
And actually, Mr.
And I would
Scott,
advise you to stop being insulting.
I didn't say you were
Thank
standing on
you.
anything. I was
Thank
asking
you.
us a question. What do you think
Thank
of the
you.
pros and cons, Mr. Scorsese?
Thank you.
Did I ask that question or not? Did I?
Please
You
go
did.
ahead with your presentation. Pull the chairs out.
So we're just going to go through some of the comments that we received from our members and some of the input that we've received. First is, we asked the board to keep the hearing open for 2 months so that everybody in the village can find out what's going on and can make a judgment for themselves. 2 weeks is not enough time. First of all, by having this facility put in place in one part of the village, it's going to affect the rest of the village, and yet most of the village is only just hearing about it now. We're a group of homeowners in the area, and frankly, you know, every time we come here, we say the same thing, and it's discounted because you're just saying the same thing. Well, we're saying the same thing because it matters to us. I feel fairly confident that if we put this 2-acre size building, 80,000 square feet, somewhere in your neighborhood, you'd have some concerns too. We just want to get what we came here to buy. We bought houses, as our friends said, in a place where we expected a certain quality of life. And the lady who came about the dogs, madam, I'm completely not against having facilities for the elderly. I'm against having the facility in a neighborhood which was built for single-family homes. That's all. I'm very happy. I will help you. But I'm very happy to help you. But I don't think that having this facility in our neighborhood is what we want. So, our concerns are, we're concerned the village is in the process of really destroying the nature of the village. We're not against development that follows the zoning plan. We've talked about this floating zone, but board, we don't think you're listening to us. You think you're nodding and acquiescing to these words. Sometimes some of the people on the board and the support are sleeping. We don't think we're being...
What?
Well,
It's not true.
oh, really?
How did you say that?
well, just tonight.
He's not on the board.
I didn't say it was, I said the board and the supporting members.
That we've been sleeping. That's just so unfair.
One person said that, and one person was sleeping. Especially,
Go ahead,
yeah. Our comments are being treated with platitudes and disdain. And I say, for example, an example of disdain is when we say, we think that this should be done in a certain way, and the answer is, oh, nobody knows the answer, let's move on. That's happened a number of times. We extended an olive branch to the board in September of last year and said, come and visit us in our neighborhood. You didn't. And
Not true.
no, you went by yourselves. We extended the opportunity to visit with us and to talk to us. But you just went through the neighborhood taking photographs of the full foliage. Right. That wasn't an attempt to get together and resolve this issue. We're now in a position where, in our opinion, you're headed in one direction,
And in our opinion, we're headed in another direction, and there's no place to go. It's like Crimea almost. I use that for effect, ladies and gentlemen. Don't get too upset. We have over 200 petitioners, and here's some of the things that they're saying. I'm strongly against this proposed project. Where's the benefit for the town? More traffic, and you can read the rest of it. The selling out by a government of these floating zones, leaving things as they are, makes a lot of sense. I feel strongly this development is not in the best interest of the residents. The board has not given a definitive answer as to why they're allowing this to happen. And that's the thing I said to you. I asked the board today, what are the opinions, pro and con, for this project? I didn't ask them to say whether they're in favour or not. I was just asking for an opinion. Another, during the years I volunteered in the Planning Commission, my guiding principle for all requests for variances and approvals was the protection of homeowners. Homeowners are Pleasantville, in my opinion. This ridiculous project, which is totally inappropriate in scale and its impact on the quality of life in Pleasantville, is appalling. The additional tax income does not outweigh the detriment this facility would do to our economy. By the way, the tax income is less than 0.5% of the total revenue for the village. The village spends, I don't know, an inordinate amount, probably about $6 million on salaries and pensions, and about another $3 or $4 million for police salary and pensions. You know, what are we talking about here? 100,000? We still don't know how much money is going to come from this. What we do know is that the Henkel's facility generates about $108,000 of income. How much is that? How many times 100,000 are you going to have to do to make an impact on this $60 million budget that the village has?
20.
Well, actually, a lot more than 20. Do the maths, Mr. Mayor. That's 206.
I've done the math for 12 years.
I've been the resident of Pleasantville since the fall of 2011. Many of the things that drew me to the neighborhood, quiet, low traffic, low light pollution, walkability, will be heavily compromised by a facility like this. I'm willing to pay the high property taxes in exchange for the quality of life that I enjoy. A facility like this would make me think seriously about moving elsewhere. Talk about being a bad neighbor and all the impacts to our town as listed above. I do hope logic comes back into this debate and this facility is located in another part of town that's more appropriate. I previously worked with REIT investments in commercial shopping malls located through the US for about 15 years. I can guarantee that REITs looking for cash returns. Okay, that's fine. But what I can see, also realistic bad will outweigh any immediate future good. The facility is not in keeping with the character of village or surrounding neighborhoods. How many times do we have to repeat this till the message gets across? How many times? Another. Please don't let this happen. This would defeat the whole purpose of why most of us have decided to put down roots in Pleasantville. Both my father and father-in-law are currently in 2 different assisted living facilities. I can assure you that while these places are indeed necessary, they require too much activity and support structure to be sited in a residential area like this. Neither the facility nor any of the other we visited is sited in a small residential neighborhood like this. I'm extremely opposed to this development. I've lived near the St. Jude's facility on Oak Bridge for 22 years, and I can tell you I've been run off the road several times by the centre's buses. Presumably there won't be any buses here. The employees and service delivery personnel don't think of neighbourhoods the way we do. I often wonder if they think of our children as speed bumps, given the way they drive. What is the village thinking about? Tax income? They currently get about $9 million from the residents of the village, and Benchmark will not make a dent in those revenues. So, who benefits from this? It doesn't seem that the homeowners are going to benefit from this. How does the homeowners, how do the residents, the 7,000 people in Pleasantville and the 4,000 families benefit from this facility? I've got to say, I've analysed this every which way and up. Yeah, I've got a bias, but I'm also scientific about what I do. And the answer is, I can't see any. Now, it says over 195, well, it's over 200 now. We conservatively expect Benchmark will generate some $3.5 million of profit. That's good, and it's all American, but not in that location. It's important to note also that the assisted living facilities are springing up all over the place. There's 9 and there's 2 more. So again, going back to what I mentioned before, we cannot be certain that the operators of our facilities will be able to achieve and maintain occupancy. Our operators are expected, I know it's a 10K, but this is what they're saying. Our operators are expected to encounter increased competition in the future that could limit their ability to attract residents. The point is, all these other facilities springing up all over the place are going to create the same pressure. And then what? What happens to this white elephant? What is it repurposed for? A hotel? I don't know. And then floating zone. The village board recognises there's an increased societal need within the village of Pleasantville and surrounding communities to provide specialised housing for senior citizens. Where's the demand? Much of this has been driven by a financial artifice of the tax benefit. Who in this village can afford $8,000 a month when the median income is $120,000? How does that work? Where's the math? Oh, and locating housing for the village's growing senior population. This has been said over and over again, but here's some data. The Journal of American Medicine shows that over 30% of people are functionally immobile and get to that point within a year and a half. How are they going to generate revenue for the rest of the village? They're not. They're doing all they can to just pay for this facilities. Yet, this other thing, I'm still not clear. Have we got an agreed legal document that says that the exit is going to be on Bedford Road and not on Maple Hill? Do we? Can somebody answer that?
If the project were to be approved, it would be approved as per the site plan.
Sorry, yeah, Mr. Mayor.
If the project were to be approved, it would be approved contingent upon fulfillment of the site plan that has been proposed. That is, if it's approved with the promise of its own driveway off Bedford Road, that can't be changed.
So then, does it mean that if the driveway is not provided directly onto Bedford Road, it won't go ahead?
Correct.
Good. Thank you. That's a good answer. So what does it look like? This is what it looks like on the ball field. This is what it looks like compared to the church. This is what it looks like coming out of Campus Drive.
Could you just make clear that these are your renderings,
Yep.
not theirs?
Yep, fine. So these renderings were made by a professional firm in Canada based on specifications provided by Benchmark.
But these are not their elevations.
These are not their elevations, but they're as close as they could be based upon their data. And I went specifically to the county to get the topographic elevations. I went to the county to look at the hydrological.
I mean the appearance of the buildings.
It doesn't matter. It's the height of the building I'm talking to and the size, Mr. Mayor. That's my
I
concern.
just don't want people to misunderstand that what you show is what it will look like.
It's the height and the size that I'm pointing out to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You're right. The finishings are completely different, or might be the same. I don't know. Another view. Another view. So our questions, we asked some questions, very specific questions we sent to the village. Dan Blaney sent them, said, he wanted a map of the properties affected by the floating zone. There was a request to identify other potential parcels. The request to have an independent assessor review the impact analysis. While we were here during that review, the assessor was having to be coached. Now, Andrew Tom's assessment of the loss of value was twice what the loss of value was from the Benchmark and their team. I don't know who's right. I can always think that the petitioner wants to have a better result for them, and the contestants would have a worse result for them. Right, so maybe the answer is somewhere in between. I asked for an estimate of the change in the hydrology that the excavation would create. That hill there, by the way, I don't know if you know, but there's a huge aquifer right down here in the village of Pleasantville. Did you know that? This whole village is full of water. So there's a hydrological gradient across that lot. You start digging away, what's going to happen to the ground which is saturated at a certain level around those houses and keeps them in a certain place? Who is going to warranty that our houses, if there are any subsidence, they're going to pay for it? I'll tell you what, I'm having an engineering company go over my house before anything happens. You know, you asked for protection. Mr. Sachs, you asked for this. You said, what about if the retaining wall is disrupted? Are you going to pay for this? Well, I'd like for Benchmark to pay for when my retaining wall, my house goes down. You know, I just see this truck going down the street, and all it's doing is going towards this end goal. I really feel like sometimes I watch Bill standing here today speaking to the board. Some people were on their laptop, some people were doing something else. They were ignoring what Bill was saying, or maybe they weren't. But that's how I feel. When you respond that way and you don't look at me, when you don't have your attention towards me and what we're saying, that's what I think you're doing. It's a matter of respect, as I said before. I'm not challenging you to get your opinion, Mr. Scarstad. I'm asking for you for the two pros and cons. I didn't ask for an opinion. And
It's
furthermore,
kind of an opinion. That's kind of an opinion is what you're asking.
An opinion has a bias. A
No,
pro
not-
and a
well,
con
anyway, let's
provides
go
a
back and
balanced
forth,
view.
But you're splitting hairs here. So.
I'm being quite didactic. I'm just using the language as it exists. Now, before anybody convinces me I'm being heuristic, I'll just say, look, we reached out to you to have a conversation. From the moment Benchmark, I remember, sir, you came to the Methodist Church, remember that? And right at that time, I made an estimate of how much money you guys were going to make out of that. That's fine. But there was never any discussion about what do we really want. What could we live with? It was, I'm going to bring in this 4-story building because I know you're not going to like it, so I'm going to just take it down 1 floor. Nice work, right? And then we've got this incredible bus of momentum going down the street. And I don't feel anybody's listening. I don't know how I can ask you to respond. I mean, you can say all the right things, but there's been no sort of movement to let us know that you're really balanced on both sides. Because every time I see what the said board is saying, how it's responding, it always seems to me, and maybe I'm paranoid, I admit maybe I'm paranoid, it always seems to me you're headed down one end goal, which is put this facility in place. Taxes. When are we going to find out how much we're going to get making taxes? Why does it take so long to do this? We know what the physical size is, we know what the income is, we know how many people are going in and out. Why don't we have an answer for that? And even when we do, what's the difference to the village? Each one of us pays about 3.5% of our gross median income. These guys are paying half of that. Now, that's just the way business is. You know, commerce is this way. But you should know this. But in the end, I'm asking, why are we disrupting this area which is not zoned for commercial purpose with a building that is completely commercial? And how long will it be before the next floating zone comes in and somebody else's properties get taken over? You've seen how easy it is. 15 months, we're almost down at the end game. How is that possible? I should tell you, all this started in Tarrytown. This whole floating zone was first made possible through a lawsuit in the 50s in Tarrytown, which is not a great thing to know. But, you know, the fact that there's such a floating zone that takes the travesty of zoning, you might as well not have zoning. You just put a floating zone in place. Yeah, you have to have the board's agreement and everything else, but, you know, it's a change that can be made. And every time you come into Pleasantville and you want to live in Pleasantville, are you going to know that somebody's not going to put a floating zone in your backyard? With that, I'd like to thank the board. I apologize if you feel I've been a bit strident, but I also want to make a point. I want you to listen to what we're saying, because honestly, I don't feel sometimes you are listening. It feels like you're just saying, yes, yes, let's get this over with. I know it's going to be painful. Yeah, it's going to be painful because we've got to get to a compromise some way, one way or another. And we're not getting there. Thank you.
Is anyone else going to need the screen? Thank you, Yuri. Helpful to have that on the record. I just would like to add to the record, the impression is left that we've been unresponsive, and boy, I don't spend a lot of my life getting described as a bad listener, including the fact that I invited Yuri to my office with Brian on a weekend, and he's the one that decided when it was over, not us. So I just add that to the record. So, next.
My name is Gail Wind. I do not live in the village, but I am a member of Pleasantville Ambulance Corps. And I'd just like to say to that gentleman, I do live in a town of Mount Pleasant. I think he's left. And no, you're still here. We do have a police department, and we have good services also. So, and I live in a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood, where we have Rosary Hill Home. I can see that from my home. And if anybody knows anything about Rosary Hill Home, it's a beautiful facility, and there is... Yes, but like I said, I can see it from my home, and there's not a problem with traffic and whatnot. My question to you is, and that the ambulance corps has never been approached regarding the burden of this facility on our ambulance corps. I know they said they met with the fire commissioner, but no one approached the ambulance corps. This will be a huge impact on us, one that we probably will not be able to handle, I'll be honest. In a time when volunteerism is extremely down, I know with the Atria and Briarcliff, they're there constantly. They have actually had to put on paid people now to cover calls. I personally would suggest looking into contracting out an ambulance service.
Which is what they, Gail, you weren't a part of that, and I apologize for that, because we certainly should have made sure that is the case, and we'll catch up with that. But they have agreed to have a contract service.
Oh, okay. Okay. We didn't know.
Right.
You know. Okay, that's...
So, at any rate, we need to explore
Now, my
that.
question is, who decides non-emergency?
Okay, so, I mean, that clearly is an important point, and we need to pursue that, and we
Yeah.
will. So I thank you for bringing that up. Just for the record, Gail and her family are the linchpins of the Pleasantville Volunteer Ambulance Corps, and deserve all of our thanks for that.
Thank you. So, if, you know, they know where to, you know where to get in touch with
And
us.
we
just
will
so
do
we
that
can,
for sure.
You know, discuss it, because it's...
Absolutely.
This has come up, and
Right.
members have expressed their concern, and so...
No problem. Will do.
And, oh, on the elevator, just can you make sure, because we have the senior house that we have here? Okay, because we cannot fit a stretcher in that elevator there, so... Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Gail.
Thank you, Gail.
Other speakers, come on.
Hi there. Pam O'Keefe, 87 Bedford Road. I just was looking at your documents, and something seemed fairly contradictory to me. You write down here, generates limited traffic on area roadways, and then about 5 sentences down it says, bolster the local economy through daytime patronage of local businesses. Those two seem opposite ends of the spectrum to me. You can't have it both ways. You know, you can't say there's no traffic, but we're going to get lots of business from this. As she mentioned, whether you contract out the ambulances or you use our ambulances, there's going to be ambulances. And we already have a very serious problem with pedestrian traffic in this town, as I'm sure you all know. That there's a lot of people, and that's one of the things that makes Pleasantville great, is that you can walk everywhere, and our kids walk to school and all that sort of stuff. But there's a big problem with parking. There's a big problem with people walking. I mean, I know somebody, speaking of for seniors, I mean, I know someone whose mother got hit by a car on Summit Place, you know, walking. Yeah.
Sutton Place.
Sutton Place, I think Sutton Place, yeah. Sutton Place, you know, and, you know, broke her leg walking her, you know, her grandchild to school. I mean, it's a real serious problem. Everyone knows it. When you get off the train at night, you know, there's just a lot of traffic in this town, and it makes me very concerned that there will be ambulances, and there will be trucks, and there will be just a lot more cars and people. And it's already, as you mentioned when we opened up the meeting, it's only a 2-square-mile village. So how much more can we really take in terms of this? And as the other people mentioned, you know, it doesn't bolster the local economy through daytime patronages. I mean, maybe visitors, you know, maybe the people who work there, but not in any sizable way that I could see that would definitely be worth it, in my opinion.
So I would just refer you, there's a lot of detail about traffic and a detailed traffic study, which I believe is still up on the website. If it isn't, just get in touch with me and I'll make sure you get it. I think it's still on the website, but that would give you a lot more data about the number of trips that are anticipated.
The number of what, ambulance trips and the number of
all
the...
kinds of traffic
Do you-
throughout the course of the day.
Pardon me?
Not ambulance trips.
Not ambulances. Do you foresee, I mean, I'm sorry if I'm going over something that you guys already know, I haven't been to all these meetings, but do you foresee a traffic light on Bedford Road?
No.
Okay.
It's not our road.
Yeah, well, first off, it's
Not our road.
it's a state road there, but secondly, the traffic numbers, and I refer you to the traffic study, are pretty moderate. There are impacts attached to this. Traffic, at least in my estimation, is not the biggest of them. So I think it's worth your look, since that's a matter of concern to you.
Thank you.
There's a lot of detail, so.
Hi, if you remember a few years ago, there was a traffic study on Bedford Road.
Yes.
Because people thought there was an increase in, enough increase in people and pedestrians as well as cars to validate the reason for a light, I think in Brentwood.
Well,
And it was decided,
it was at Manville and Bedford.
Manville and
Right.
Bedford. Now, you don't think an increase would validate our getting a traffic light there?
I'm
I'm
stretching
just
my
curious.
memory here, but I believe that the activity at Bedford and Manville potentially qualified for a traffic light. I can tell you that the idea of adding such a traffic light is not everybody's idea of a solution. It's some people's idea of a solution.
Okay.
The state obviously is the major player there. Manville and Bedford there are state roads. So the numbers in the traffic study, based on the activity at this site, are not particularly
At the current time?
substantial. Well, the proposed use.
At the current time?
What do you mean?
If we increase the...
No, the traffic study submitted by Benchmark and vetted by our people is an attempt to project the traffic of various
Okay.
types throughout the course of the day.
But I thought at the time that the study was done, it was very close to being a new light.
That's a whole different matter back at
Oh.
Manville at Bedford.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Who's next? Good.
Here. Hi, Joan Horton, Nanahagan Road, 50 Nanahagan Road, sorry. I want to go back to discussion that was taking place between the board and the woman who lives on Maple Hill about the adequate notice of the meeting. I don't live on Maple Hill, I'm on Nanahagan, pretty far away. I try to, stay abreast of villages, issues in the village. The board, you guys are amazing. The hours you put in is, I've been to board meetings on other topics, and I know it's just many, many hours. So anyway, I subscribed, as many of you probably do, to...
Well, we don't really pay attention, so it's easier for us.
I get emails that give the agendas for the board meetings. So the reason I'm here tonight is I got an email on March 18th. No, not on March 18th, sorry.
Not March 18th.
It mentioned on March 7th,
Big Bang
March
Theory.
7th, I got an email announcing tonight's agenda. And on the agenda is public hearing, local law amending, blah, blah, blah. Forgive me, I'm just going to skip through that. To add a new Article 5A entitled Eldercare Community EC Floating District. Then in parentheses, and I don't see why this is necessary, because we're not only talking about the benchmark project on Maple Hill, we're talking about our whole village, every taxpayer in this village. And you're amending the zoning code, and so in parentheses after this, it says benchmark senior living zoning petition, and I think for some people, maybe that's a little misleading, because maybe they saw that and they said, oh, it's that benchmark thing, it's not in my backyard, it doesn't pertain to me, I'm not gonna, and, this is just my 2 cents. I do not think that people in our village as a whole are well educated about this zoning, the floating zone that's about to be voted on, that just applies to any, place in the village that's 3.5 acres, borders a county or state road, and so on. So, that's my first point. My question is, you know, some of you have a piece of paper. Was there a mailing sent out to residents about this meeting?
Yes.
Because I didn't get one.
In the area.
In the area.
Right, but since this amendment applies to me.
Well, it doesn't actually apply
Well,
to you.
I live on Nanahagan Road,
Right,
and
which is neither a state nor a county road.
right, but I'm 5 doors down from the intersection of Lake, Broadway, and Nanahagan, where the JCCA property I
Right.
had read previously was also entertaining Eldercare
So,
community being
let me
built.
just cycle back to that. As we have said many times since we first had the discussion, JCCA let us know that it was on their radar screen to think about the potential long-term lease or sale of a parcel at the corner of Lake Street and Broadway, not right at the corner, but into the woods a bit, for senior assisted living use.
Right.
When that was made known to us, we made it known to everyone, including the applicant. I've reached out multiple times to JCCA since then and have been told there's no movement on that. So I don't know what will be next on that. But just to let you know, there is a separation requirement in the proposed floating zone that says if one is established, there is a separation of a half mile that won't, in essence, a radius around it.
Yeah,
you can't
a
put
half
another
mile.
one.
I gotta think
So
that's not longer than a half mile.
It's our belief that that half mile captures the JCCA site, the corner of their site. So that would be a
I
straight
hadn't
line as
measured
the
whether
crow
that's a
flies.
half mile or not,
So,
and
at any rate.
I don't want to be, you know, only
We're not sure.
selfish and thinking
Right.
about myself, because I think there's other people in the village whose homes border a state or county road, and also maybe near a 3-acre parcel, that have no idea that this floating zone may be approved. And you know, it was mentioned, the gentleman from Benchmark said that there's a map of where else in the village this exists?
There is.
Is that in your documents on the website? Because I did read through some of them. I have to admit, I didn't click on every tab.
It certainly was there. We'll double check, but I can also email that to you. It's a submission that has been discussed at least 2 public meetings, has been up on the website, been the subject of quite a bit of discussion.
Okay,
What it identifies is that there are very few parcels that would meet these
But
standards.
does it delineate them, like, exactly
Yes,
where they are?
Exactly where they are.
Good, all right, so
Now,
I will go back to, I apologize, I'll go back to
And I'll
the-
send that, I'll myself send that to you just to be sure you get it. I do think it's on the site, that there
Well,
are,
I think it really
I
should
mean,
be
there
on
are
the site.
so many documents at this point.
Right, but I mean, I
I-
think this is
no,
really,
that's
really
fine. I'll
important.
send that to you.
And I also think that the homes that are in a radius of any of those sites that are on this list, that I'm gonna go home and read, those people should get a paper notice, just like all these Maple Hill people, and you should not go forward with a vote until those people have had a chance to write. I mean, that's just, how could that be? No, honestly, I mean, right? I mean,
Well, it's impossible to predict where a zone like this might be proposed to be applied. And indeed, if the benchmark zone were to be,
but if he has a map, if he told me he has a list of the sites.
hear me out, and I'll send you that list. If the benchmark site were to be established under this floating zone with a half-mile radius around it, it knocks out most of the potential sites. The sites that remain are sites like the village playing fields, that sort of site. So I'll send you that map.
Well, the homes that are near those sites that remain, it's my belief that the homeowners that are in whatever radius is the legal radius for sending out a paper notice instead of you having to subscribe to agendas and everything else, I think those people should be made aware that a floating zone is about to be made law, that, like, they live, like, it changes their property value forever. And that's my personal opinion, that the notice maybe could have been more zesty. You know, I just feel like the notice wasn't, so that's my issue with the whole notice process. I just don't feel like, I stumbled upon it, and I just, you know, not that I do care deeply about the residents of Maple Hill, and I think it's, if I have to tell my opinion, I think it's inappropriate to plop this down on that site. But my bigger concern tonight, and the reason I'm here, is, you know, the village of Pleasantville, and you're going to slap this floating zone. Like, why can't you just go ahead with this whole project just, you know, by itself? Like, I think as homeowners, for most of us, our home is our biggest financial asset. So don't we deserve something that's going to, like, be given a exception to the zoning that we bought into, a case-by-case review of something that's going to, you know, affect our property value?
So let me just say that, I mean, we have been intensively involved with the neighbors, as well as a spectrum of people they have included in this discussion, and all of us, and I particularly, have gone way out of my way to try to make sure that that happens, and I'll keep doing that. If the floating zone were to be enacted at that site, there is still a process, just like the one we've gone through for 15 months, that would apply to any future proposal to use it. And so I understand the point you're making about the potential impact in potential other neighborhoods, and I hear what you're saying, but I just also want to assure you that there's a whole big, long secret review associated with every one of these potential proposals if another one were to come, with zillions of opportunities, as there have been in this case, to weigh in on it. So.
Yes, and thank you for that. But
Okay.
you know, I still think that if this floating zone is in place, then, you know, a resident's first argument being that, you know, this is R3, you can't put that here, is shot. Because
Well, I mean, let me just, the
You've
world,
decided that already.
the world is less certain than we all might wish sometimes. For example, religious uses are permitted anywhere by state law, and so a religious use could prop up in lots of places where nobody anticipated it. The other thing we deal with, which is certainly in play in our discussion about the Toll Brothers project in Washington Avenue, is the list of possibilities. You know, if not this, then what? So, you know, all of those things are on the radar screen. So I hear your point. I understand it. We work pretty darn hard to get the word out, and I say with humility, it's never enough, because there's always more we can do, and we should keep trying, and we will.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, I have to say again, I think before the board votes, I really do think the word should be gotten out a little bit better. Because aside from my emailed agenda that I signed up to receive these emails, what public notice was there? Was there anything at a local newspaper?
This has
or
been
any-
discussed in detail for 15
I'm not-
months,
I'm
multiple
sorry to interrupt. I'm not
multiple
talking about the
newspapers.
Maple Hill.
No,
I'm talking about the floating zone.
but the floating
That's
zone
together.
as part of the
15 months.
discourse. So it's been in the newspaper, it's been on, I mean, I've done PCTV shows, we've had
I understand
very,
that.
very long.
I'm not-
I
see,
understand, I mean,
do
we're-
you-
I understand your
I'm
point.
trying to separate the two. I'm just talking
Right.
about the legality of a floating zone,
I do
period.
understand your point.
Forget Maple Hill,
Right.
not that I agree with you guys, but
Yeah.
forget that whole thing.
She didn't mean that.
I do not feel that
Thinking that because you put benchmark on there, people are
People-
already discounting it, saying.
they're saying, oh, it's Maple Hill, it's Maple Hill. And they are, trust me, they are. So what effort has been made to notify everybody in this village that you're...
I'm not quite sure how we could notify, well, we'll think about that.
I just feel like it wasn't made clear. I'm sorry. I'm just giving you my honest opinion, and I'm saying in
Okay,
good
I
faith,
got
I
it.
don't think
Understood.
it should move forward without better, more complete notice.
Understood.
And, you know, and one point in defense of the Maple Hill crowd, you know, years ago, I attended many meetings on issues that we have on Nanahagan Road. We were, you know, wishing for a sidewalk, and, you know, that's not going to happen. But, you know, a few members of this board, I remember at the end of the day, one of the main reasons we were given, and, you know, I had to accept it, and I've moved on, but one of the main reasons we were given was we don't have consensus of the property owners. You know, we have to protect their property value, and, you know, we're sorry, Joan, you know, your neighbor next door doesn't agree with you, across the street, they agree, but we don't have consensus, and we cannot, you know, we have to respect the rights of these taxpayers. So And I swallowed that, but it doesn't sound like that's really that same logic that you, it doesn't sound like the Maple Hill people are getting that. So I think they should. Because I think their interest is paramount. Yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Pat Hutton, 42 Maple Hill Road. I've lived there for 27 years. What brought me to Pleasantville was the fact that it's a small village, the whole community aspect of Pleasantville, and certainly the school district, the homes that are here. I live on Maple Hill. It is a residential portion and part of the village. To change that and what you're proposing, or what is being proposed, will change that dramatically. And it just doesn't seem to be in the spirit and the context of what Pleasantville is. The beauty of Pleasantville in electing all of you to represent us, you're homeowners, and I do know the tireless hours that you put in, but your job is to represent the villagers of Pleasantville, not to represent the developers that are coming into Pleasantville. I certainly have not heard a compelling case, be it taxes. It certainly didn't sound like we would be getting an awful lot from that. And the things that we would be losing, the spirit, the sense of community that we have. And we've entrusted all of you by voting you into office or letting you accept all of these long hours and choosing to more or less volunteer your time. And we do appreciate those efforts. But we really do trust that you're going to have our best interest at heart. And that's why when I look at the numbers, and I do look at the website, and there's over 200 people that have indicated that they are against this. And that's sort of a passive way of getting this information. If it were done even more actively, it might even be, I actually think it would be much more than that. I don't think that you can ignore that. And as our representatives, and part of your civic duty in accepting the responsibility and the jobs that you have, is to ensure that you are voting on behalf of the villagers. So I know you've spent 15 months looking at this. Many of us have spent 27 years living here, building our homes, educating our children, adding to our homes, paying the taxes that Yuri had mentioned, is going in. And that's the highest coffer, I think, of revenue for the village. That cannot be discounted. And when you vote, you have to vote the conscience of the villagers, not just your own opinion. You're one cog in the wheel, that is Pleasantville. You have to vote for all of the villagers. And you're right, it's hard to get a lot of people coming to the meetings. But if you took a show of hands tonight, I think you'd sort of get a sense people are really against this. If you look at over 200 people on a website, people are against this. You have to listen to that when you make this vote. And I ask that you please do that when you do vote on this on the 24th.
Thank you. We also have your letter. You and Tom sent a letter early in this process, and that's part of the record as well.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Kimberly Wildy. I live up on the Knoll, 12 the Knoll. I've lived here my entire life, and I came back here, and I live here with my 3 children now. My husband came from Scotland, and he loved Pleasantville because it was a sense of community, that we can talk about issues like this. My concern is that I think Benchmark knows what they're doing, as you do. They never wanted 4 stories, they wanted 3 stories. They have over 40 properties, only 4 of those are 4 stories. They knew they were going for 3 stories. Where we're up on that hill near Oak Ridge, we're already bookended by a group home and St. Jude's. I'm concerned with this that if you look where that is, St. Jude's is right behind it. People are saying that the Methodist Church might be sold in a few years. St. Jude's might be sold in a few years. So what's going to stop Benchmark if you give them a floating zone now, or any other industry for coming in and saying, okay, well, we're going to buy St. Jude's, and then we're going to buy the Methodist Church, and then you have a giant complex. And yes, you say there's a half-mile to floating zone for Eldercare, but that's not floating zone for mental health or psychiatric. So I think I'm a little bit concerned that I'm going to end up living in a whole neighborhood of assisted living or psychiatric, and it's kind of, we're already bookmarked up there.
So your neighborhood is actually outside the village of Pleasantville in the town of Mount Pleasant.
I'm in Village of Pleasantville.
On the knoll?
My house is in the Village
Really?
of Pleasantville.
Okay.
I pay taxes to Pleasantville.
Thank you.
A piece of it is in Mount Pleasant, so I get to use their pool. So that's okay too.
You could use their pool as a Pleasantville
Pleasant,
resident too. So a couple of people have expressed the concern that the idea of a floating zone, in this case specific to Eldercare, might turn into a floating zone request for all kinds of other things. So there isn't anything on the table that would suggest that, and certainly it isn't the intent of this board to say, well, you know, this is the first of many flavors of ways of introducing, you know, Eldercare and, you know, God knows what else. And I appreciate your comments. I thank you for them. I want you
I'm
to
just
know
worried it will
that
create a wall almost, because if you look where our houses is, Oak Ridge, the Summit, we'll have Benchmark here, St. Jude's here, and then we're kind of separated from the town quite a lot. And right now, with the Methodist Church there, we can walk through their property, we can walk around it. It's much more family-oriented. But if there's a giant
something's going to
building
happen
another
there.
giant.
I mean, this has been going on, as you probably know, having lived here so long, for,
Ever.
I mean, I've lived here 20-some-odd
Forever.
years.
We've been
That
talking about this
That
forever.
piece of property has been
Right.
a point of concern and some contention for decades.
But does it have to
and
be
so-
3 stories? Does it have to be that big? I mean, that's the question.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
Peter McAndrew, 53 Pierce Drive. I guess my major concern, and Ms. Horton brought it up, is this whole idea of floating zoning. And I read everything. I try to watch PCTV. I have been aware of the Maple Hill project, but it wasn't until I received the email 3 days ago that I understood this float zoning issue. So shame on me for not understanding it. I consider myself to be fairly intelligent on these things, but it got past me altogether. And I just don't understand why you as a board are even considering float zoning. The village has zones. This, I believe, is a residential parcel.
Yes.
And when you have adjusted zoning in the past, I've watched it, these meetings when you were doing the Marble Avenue, and the things went on forever, certainly more than 15 months. And to me, this, you're calling this float zoning, I think it's spot zoning. And I think that's a term that's been used in the United States that refers to government officials and bodies, you know, changing the zoning laws for specific purposes. And I think you're basically abusing the whole zoning process in the village of Pleasantville that you have so carefully adhered to in the past. So I really encourage you not to do that. And that comes into play with the comment about the woman who talked about the traffic. And you immediately say, well, go to the website and look at the traffic studies, and you'll see that we've satisfied the secret requirements. The problem with that explanation, in my view, is that the alternative for there should be residential. So I don't know what capacity there is for homes there, but that is the only traffic issue in my mind that should be on the table, is that we should be considering the impact of the automobiles associated with residences on that parcel. We shouldn't be asked as the community to look at a secret study and whether the county's going to, or the state's going to provide a stoplight. So just by even entertaining this thing of float zoning, I think you put an unnecessary burden on the community.
Excuse me, sir, we're just going to have to stop for a second. I switch tapes.
Tape break. We're in. We're back.
So as a follow-up on that, I would also say it's not as though there's any confusion about what's the commercial area of Pleasantville and what's not. Even if you don't know what the zoning is, you just know from the feel of the village what's commercial and what's not. And when you're walking or slowly driving out of the old village towards Chappaqua, it's very clear that within 3 or 4 houses past the veterinary hospital, that it's a purely residential neighborhood, except for the Methodist Church, and you could argue that that's a residential use. So it's just very hard to understand why we're even considering this use. I would like to comment on the language in the preamble of the floating district document. I'll just read the first sentence. In adopting this article, the Village Board of Trustees recognizes that there is an increasing societal need within the Village of Pleasantville and its surrounding communities to provide specialized housing for senior citizens requiring some assistance with daily living. What role do you have as my representative to decide whether the village feels there's an increasing societal need for specialized housing for senior citizens? This is like government overreach. And I don't know who generated the language, but it's your preamble to your resolution for this very significant act that you're considering taking. And I just don't see where your authority comes in that regard. Finally, one of Yuri's comments was that 2 weeks seemed grossly insufficient to keep the public hearing open. And I started by saying that I think that I was surprised that I didn't pick up on I regretted that I didn't pick up on the zoning change you're making. And I think that there are a great many people in the community that probably didn't understand it either. So I suggest that 15 months is not that long, that you keep this open and deliberate a good deal more. Thank you.
Thanks.
Larry Coved, 12 Cedar Lane. So I first like to say that I appreciate the perceived need for this kind of housing and facility, whether it be in this community or otherwise. My parents live in an independent living facility that has assisted living facilities, and I've been observing what goes on for the past year and a half that they've lived in the facility. So I have a number of concerns in different aspects. So I'm glad that Gail brought up the issue around the emergency services, because I think that's a very important issue because it becomes a burden on the town and the taxpayers. I'm also skeptical that the taxes that would be paid would be able to cover any additional services that are required. Other issues that come to mind for this kind of size facility and in that particular location have to do with the available parking. Having also spent time with my parents, I observe what happens on various occasions when people go to visit, so holidays and such. Is there enough parking? So I believe that there will be overflow into the neighborhood, and we'll start creating crowding. So I live off Brentwood, and I don't have any issue with the group home that's there, but there is parking, and on certain dates it becomes it's very narrow, and I do fear for people coming over the hill, and you can't see what's going on. So there is an issue around parking. I think that needs to be considered. So around the location, and because it's a floating zone, there are two kinds of issues. The first is, and because this is the first hearing on this topic, and I wasn't aware of all the issues, although I was aware of this discussion. What are the other potential locations in the village that may be considered or appropriate for this kind of facility as defined? Can you comment on that?
I will, as I mentioned, I will make sure that the map that shows those sites is on the website, so you can pull it down. I'm going to send it to Joe, and if you want to give me your email, I can send it to you after the meeting.
Okay.
There are relatively few sites that, as it stands right now, would meet these standards. And as mentioned, there's a half-mile separation. So if one such site were to be established, it creates a half-mile radius in which no others can be created. One issue that people have raised is the question of whether it would be possible to create sites that are not currently identified by assembling multiple parcels. So that goes to the question of, is that realistic? Is that likely? Is that a concern? And I leave that to you, but we'll make sure that map is up on the site.
Judy, can we highlight that on the, I mean, a lot of people probably want to see it. Can we
You just make that a page.
dig it out
Yeah.
of the documents and actually make it its own PDF right on the front so people can see it?
I think that would be
clearly?
helpful to the community
doubt.
at large,
Absolutely.
because irrespective of this
Yeah.
particular proposal, they are large enough sites for various kinds of activities, proposed activities. I think it would be helpful for people to
Totally.
be aware.
I mean, part of our
those.
problem, we don't have world's most elaborate web infrastructure, and we've got hundreds of pages of documents related to this project. So we'll pull that one out because it's a subject of significant concern, and understandably so.
Right. Now, in terms of location, so again, based on my experience with my parents at a similar kind of facility, and roughly speaking, the same distance to a village, is that it's a relatively long distance for people who don't have great mobility, or many of them don't have great mobility. I mean, it's assisted living, and by definition. And then I look at the kinds of facilities that are available, in the old village that may be able to accommodate people that have, that require various accommodations for being able to, for access and such. And just based on visual inspection, it seems that it would be difficult for people in this kind of a facility to be able to use that. But there's also limited numbers of facilities that would perhaps be of interest to them compared to this part of the village, right? Which has potential for greater numbers of services. So whereas I can see that my parents cannot walk, effectively walk to a village and get to the services that they would like to use in the village, that's going to be the same kind of issue, I believe, here. Now, that's not, I think, your issue per se, but for the applicant, right, which is that they're trying to market that.
Just by way of background, the benchmark, correct me if I'm wrong, but the benchmark, a version of senior living is a fairly high level of assisted care, and they also provide some transportation for people to get them to places they want to go or to shopping, but it's not, as I understand it, a population that is by and large highly mobile. Is that true, Bill?
That's right.
Okay.
And
that's just the particular niche benchmark occupies, obviously.
Right,
Another,
and then they're marketing towards that.
Another operator might do something different.
Right. And so that becomes a question, which is that if it changes ownership, right, because I would assume that they're not obligated to continue operating the facility, and it could change in somewhat in character, right? So it does, and now if they are providing transportation that into the village or various parts of the village, again, the village is very small, and if you look at the old village, there's really not a lot of parking, and that would create some difficulty for traffic. Or even other parts of the village. Right? So I would say, are there other appropriate places where, people who do have mobility or would provide greater access?
Well, I mean, the reason we're discussing it about this site is that these people want to do it there, and the church wants to sell it to them. Right. We could be discussing it about another site if those two components existed, but they don't. So one of the problems that exist, obviously in our village, but in Westchester in general, is there are, obviously in a county that has, section of the county that is pretty well developed, there are very few larger parcels, which is what you'll see on that map when we post it.
And actually, the date of the map, it was posted October 28th for the October 28th meeting. And when you click on that meeting and announcements and you go to that date, you'll see all the documents submitted.
But we'll post that
and it's
on
up,
its own link to make it
still
easy.
there.
Sure, okay.
I just went on and found it myself. So.
And then I guess, because I'm also new to this whole discussion, is I think people have expressed it, but I'd like to voice my support of their concern that this proposal, which is creating a floating zone, whatever the technical term is, it is of concern because it could be moved to any number of places, and it feels like it opens a potential Pandora's box, as you have done this here, and therefore people could challenge any other rejections of trying to create a similar kind of accommodation for another developer.
Well, so we'll post that map, and as you will see, there are relatively few sites that meet the size criteria. Obviously, there's the question of whether someone could assemble multiple parcels in therefore create the minimum size, but that'll be up to your judgment. So take a look at that map. We'll make sure it has its own link, but in the meantime, if you, tonight it's on the October, what was it, 28th?
October 28th.
Okay.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Right.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and board members. It's getting to a late night. And my name is Soo-hee Kim. I live at 49 Sutton Place, and I am at the pastor of the United Methodist Church of Pleasantville. And first, I would like to thank you for all of the time, energy that you donate to manage our village very well, and in particular, evaluating the merits of this proposal. And I'm sure that it entails many more hours than just the public meeting times. I really do appreciate that. And the United Methodist Church has been part of this community over 200 years, and I'm sure I'm trying very hard to continue that history. And it is very important to us that we contribute to the community, and that anyone or organization that we are associated with reflects our interests and goals and is also a good neighbor. So the church chose to propose an assisted living project to address a long-standing community need, and a project also consistent with our mission. We chose to work with Benchmark Senior Living because it had a reputation for good business practices and cooperation. And in the course of developing our project, Benchmark lived up to its reputation. When some neighbors voiced concerns about the scale of the building, Benchmark modified its site plan and reduced its size. And when concerns were expressed about potential traffic hazard if traffic entered from Maple Hill Road, and Benchmark spent several months re-engineering the entrance so that the entrance now would be directly from Bedford Road. And you can see that the Benchmark people are polite and considerate, and we do believe that Benchmark will be good neighbors to all of us, and that this project will be professionally managed, and that it will be an important asset to the community. And we certainly hope that you will adopt the proposed zoning amendments. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dan Blaney. I'm at 50 Maple Hill Road. And thank you. The church is very good neighbors. They are very good with the neighbor, and I think they do very good work. I don't think anybody has any problem with the church. Just that they're in a scenario where they need money because of whatever scenario that they have, and they have their RRR zoning, and perhaps it should have been a RRR, and they could have made their money that way. However, they're feeling that they need to go for the gusto and get as much money as they can get for this, and I guess that's what we're all here for. If they had just complied with zoning, this would be very easy, simple solution. So I have a couple of questions. Someone had brought up about the zoning, the floating zone, and how come not everybody in the entire village was notified. And you said, I don't want to misquote you, but I think you said something along the lines of, I did the best I could in terms of trying to tell everybody.
So, well,
But
what
go
I
ahead,
meant to
yeah.
say, and we'll reconsider that in the context of the comments Joan made and that you made, we noticed the people around this site and also have been aggressively making sure that the neighbors knew when every step of this process was going to happen. So the idea of noticing the whole community because of the potential floating zone is something we could talk about. I don't know whether that would be something we would do or not. There are big areas of the community that couldn't be affected by it in their own neighborhoods because they're not near a county or a state road. Arguably, to the extent that any citizen is interested in zoning, it's a good thing if they pay attention. So we'll look at it.
Okay. I brought this up two times before, and you said the same thing. So I'm not confident. Is there a way to protest? We already put one protest together and successfully won that one. How do we protest this one and say that you're going to call
protest?
up? Well, I guess the map for the property. And then they
I
said
don't know
that-
what you
they
mean
said
by
that they were-
protest. I mean, the
it
map has
wasn't a
been out there
protest.
since
There
October,
was a
so-
discussion. It wasn't a protest. Tonight, somebody called up and said that there were two things, and then the map zoning change just for that property was now called off for tonight. Isn't that true, what happened tonight?
Well, we're going to see what the implications of that are. I assure you that if there's an oversight there, it was unintentional on the part of the staff that put this together, and if it needs to be fixed, we will.
That's
I mean,
completely
there is
understandable.
just
Yeah.
no part of us trying to hide anything from anybody.
No, I don't think you are, yeah. No,
So-
but that's,
And if we should fix it, we will, and I appreciate your comments.
yeah, and on a technicality, I think
Yeah.
they pulled that part. But in terms of saying that everybody should have been notified in the village that was 500 feet from
Yeah,
State
I
road.
somewhat doubt that there's any legal requirement to do that, whether there's a practical or a responsibility to do it. I mean, we'll talk about it. I have not, we hadn't contemplated that, especially since the potential sites for such a thing are quite limited. And if anyone did propose one for such a thing, there would be this whole long 15-month process. So, but I do understand your point, and we'll definitely talk about it.
Okay. And that color map that they had put together, I think that was based on my request, and then you forwarded
Yes.
that to them?
Yep.
Thank you very much.
October 28th.
I forwarded another question saying, because I think there's only two other properties that actually apply with the 3.5 acres and the county state road and all that. I had sent in an email that was acknowledged of receipt, but I never got a response, so I don't know what that means. So my question is, can I get like a sketch of those two lots just to see how, if they're possibly
What,
developable, if that's a word?
You mean the lots that are identified on that map?
Yes, the two extra lots, yes.
Well, there's not enough detail in the map?
Maybe I'm looking at a different map.
It's the map with the several different colors that shows parcels on state roads, parcels on
Yeah,
county
it shows
roads.
the entire village?
Right.
Yeah, and I think subsequent to that, it was acknowledged in some letter that there's only two other lots that actually subscribe to these criteria. aside
I
from
think
the church parcel.
all the lots that meet the criteria at present are on that map. True?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, say that again.
All the lots that meet the criteria are on the map you submitted on October 28th.
That's correct.
And that's been vetted by our people as well, so.
So all three
The
lots,
point,
you're saying?
you, and I think you and I had this conversation at one point, you know, there's the theoretical possibility that some one owner could assemble more lots to
Right.
create a parcel of sufficient size where one doesn't now exist in common ownership. And that was a concern you had expressed.
Yes.
So, and that obviously is a theoretical possibility, and it's one that we consider both in the question of what if and in the question of how likely. So, can't look into the future, but we're looking to be extremely cautious.
Okay,
on
that's
that
appreciated,
subject.
sure. But I guess just to, I'm not sure, maybe I was heard and I'm misinterpreting. There was a letter, I think, that said that there were only two other lots aside from the church lot property that applied to the 3 acres.
I think there are more than two,
Is there more than
except
two? I
that
don't
one of
know.
them is the Con Edison substation site. Another is
yeah.
the village playing fields.
Right, so if we could
So-
get a list.
Well, it's on the map. I don't think you need a list.
Does it have the lot number so I can actually find it, or do I have to go and search for
Those
it?
section block lot number, I don't know if it has that, but I mean, it's pretty easy to
Well,
find.
an address,
so.
say, so I can find
Huh?
it.
It pretty much has everything.
All right, maybe I'm looking at the wrong one. I apologize for holding
No,
you.
I mean,
Check.
it's pretty.
We're gonna
like,
post a specific link to
I'll
that
check
page.
that. Okay.
But also,
It
yeah.
has the road and the.
In the meantime, it's on the October 28th agenda too.
Okay, I'll look back. So the independent contracting work, one of the neighbors has expressed concern if they're gonna be doing blasting, any kind of work like that. Benchmark will be hiring them, paying them, and so on and so forth, for a pre-analysis and then a post-analysis to make sure I don't have cracks in my basement.
I mean, they would follow all the codes of the state of New York,
Yes,
and our building department would supervise that and verify fulfillment.
okay,
There are obviously consulting engineers involved in a project like that as well.
yes. Respectfully, the last time that we had that with the assessment report, that was not really an independent report. because of the coaching and all this going on. It was
I mean,
not
you may
somebody-
disagree with the results of that.
Not the results,
Of the,
not the results,
with
but-
the,
I'm
with
sorry.
the conclusion reached by the applicant's assessment report. You mean the report about trying to assess whether there would be a change in value and to quantify the change in value
Yes.
associated with proximity to this?
Yes, there's a report,
So
yeah.
I understand, not everyone buys that methodology. Some do, some don't. It's a free country.
Yeah, right.
As far as blasting and site work and all of that, the requirements for all of that are pretty well codified in the state building code and the county requirements for things like transit of blasting materials and all that kind of stuff. So that's above all of our pay grades, and blessedly so, because that's been worked out in pretty good detail. So I don't mean to suggest that having that work go on near your home isn't a significant impact for the period of time of the work, but I do think that the management and safety of it is pretty well codified in the state code.
Okay. I understand all that, and I agree, but the report was not done in that manner, I guess. I don't know if they have different codes between engineers and
You mean the report about the
assessors
blasting?
and the value of the houses, that
Oh.
report,
Well, what does that have to do with blasting and?
because it was done by a third party, and they paid for the third party, and it wasn't
Right,
really
well,
done in a manner.
all of the
Not the
submissions-
results, but the manner of which it was done.
All of the submissions were done by the applicant's consultants.
That's correct, yeah.
And they've all come to us and been vetted by our staff and our consultants. So matters like the generation of school children, which is obviously not an issue here, but is on some other projects, and economic impacts are subject of much controversy because some people like the methodology, some people don't, presented by any given entity. But I understand you have a problem with the report they provided, and you think that the loss in value will be greater than they propose.
That is a point of view, but
Right.
not necessarily even a third-party point. But I guess we're missing the point, so we'll move on.
Okay.
But there's a line in the floating zone that says, ownership. The entire site upon which an assisted living residence is proposed shall be maintained in a single ownership for as long as such use exists. It's very short and concise, but I don't know what that means. Does that mean if I sell it, it can now be used for anything?
What it means is that you can't build it straddling lots owned by two entities.
Okay. So if they were to sell this, it has to stay as an assisted living facility. They can sell from one to another, but they can't sell it to, say,
You can't
drug
build
rehab?
it straddling lots that are not in common ownership.
Okay.
That's the point.
Next idea. If they were to sell this property in the future, for whatever reason, can they sell that for another use, or does it have to be assisted living?
They couldn't sell it for another use. If they wanted to use it for another use, they'd have to go through a whole zoning change.
Okay.
It would be permitted for the Eldercare zone, and if someone were to buy it in the future and want to use it for something different, they'd have to come to the village board at the time and say, I want to do X or Y or Z, and see if they achieved it or not.
Go through the whole process.
Right, which is the same thing that happens now, anytime there's a proposed change of use anywhere.
Right. Okay. Well, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Hopefully you'll reconsider that mailing.
Okay.
You laugh every time I move this microphone down.
It's
You
all
laugh
right.
at me.
It's all right, we've gotten to know each other pretty well, so.
My name is Eileen West. I live in Foxwood.
Welcome.
Thank you. I want to kind of go back to what some of the other people touched on before, which is the residential character of this neighborhood and what this building is going to do to change it. It is not a problem that it's an assisted living facility. It's a problem that it is very large, very out of scale, 39 feet, on a small parcel, more traffic, people on shifts that are actually changing shifts when the school kids get out at 3, which I sat behind a very nice crossing guard for 20 minutes today trying to get from my house to my office because it was close to 3 o'clock. This is not, it's really not Pleasantville. I mean, I know that I've been here before regarding Toll, and Toll Brothers is now putting in something that is really not what the single-family homes are about. This is bigger. This is gargantuan. And to put it here on that hill in this neighborhood with single-family homes and small units in Foxwood is, in my opinion, it's just not right. And I really hope that you guys think about the character of this neighborhood and what this is going to do to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, all. I know it's been a long night so far. I hope not to prolong it unnecessarily. I have no question about the intentions or the integrity.
Just give your name and address for the record.
Sorry, Matthew Finkelstein, 11 Gramerton Road. I have no questions about the integrity of the board and the amount of tireless hours that you put in to vet this as best as you can. And we know that Benchmark intends to be a good neighbor. My personal opinion on this issue is that it's a little village. It's a big facility. And when someone else spoke earlier and talked about a Pandora's box, I was going to cross it off, but I'm going to say it again because I feel that there is a lot of unintended consequences that could result from adopting this project that could forever alter the character of the village. I also want to divorce the idea of approval for Benchmark and the idea of this floating zone, because the floating zone was a proposal that was prepared to facilitate the approval of Benchmark ultimately, or to ease its, someone else mentioned the idea of spot zoning. So there has to be a fine line where that if this was the only qualifying parcel, it would be ipso facto spot zoning, but there has to be some other parcels within the village that would qualify that would allow it to be a truly floating zone. And my concern is that to build on what Joan and some of the other folks had mentioned earlier today is on that notice issue, because however unintentionally, the supposition perhaps was that the people who were affected by this were the folks in the Maple Hill area, when in reality there are other parcels that would be affected. And I think the definition of affected is not just frontaging a state road. I think anyone that's within shouting or sight distance of one of those facilities that could go up anywhere in the village is affected. So one of the things I'd like to ask the board to do, and I'm not a zoning lawyer, and so I don't know the legal formalistic requirements of notice. There was a proposal to extend the public comment period or the public hearings 2 months. We have this whole map versus zoning amendment issue that's come up, and there seems to be some uncertainty as to the legalistic aspects of that. But my request, and I was going to request that map, and I understand it's in there, and now it's going to be on the site. So I have requests, and the board can do with it what they like. I would request the map, number one, be made available on the website.
Which
it has been.
It is right now.
I mean, easily with a link. So
No,
anyone can check.
we'll make a new link.
Great. Excellent. I would also ask, and I understand that there's shading of certain areas that meet that criteria.
Right.
And then there's a whole idea of the assembly of parcels, which is theoretical at present, but cannot forever be excluded. Perhaps thought could be given to shading those areas where it would satisfy the certain criteria but would not presently constitute an acceptable parcel. I would just put that out there, and I make the request, and the pros and cons of that can be debated internally whether that's going to be done. And then my other request, as a lawyer, I'm concerned about legal fees eating up any potential financial benefit from property taxes. We basically take the notice issue off the table. And how do we do that? Is by making the process unquestionably notifying perhaps all village residents. And by also giving them the actual map that you're going to mock up. Not everybody has a computer. Not everybody gets email. Not everybody is savvy enough to get those email notifications. So making that to everyone so they have the option to come here, and then it's off the table. Then nobody can say, hey, I didn't know about it. Because I think it's been plain tonight that there's a substantial portion of Pleasantville residents that came tonight that didn't know about it. I knew about it, but I didn't know tonight was the public hearing until I got, there was a posting on the Pleasantville board, and the mayor did respond, and it was very helpful to have that text of the amendment that I could look at before today. So I do have another question about the proposed amendment. In one of the sections it says, acceptable parcels must also be located within a quarter-mile walking / driving distance of a, quote, commercial and personal service establishments. So has anyone made the determination, number one, that the present site meets that criteria, and has anyone considered the other sites that have been designated as conforming for purposes of that map, whether there's sufficient commercial and personal service establishments to make it acceptable? And the reason I'm concerned about it is because once you've adopted a vague zoning provision, I believe it could either get stricken down or it may not be enforceable. And so it becomes a requirement or a criteria without teeth, or it could be subject to future litigation. And once you adopt a floating zone, how do you go back? And that's one of the things that I'd like to be considered by the board, because once you go there, how do you take something away? We put in the floating zone, benchmark gets approved, people realize, hey, maybe this isn't the greatest thing, we try to take it away. What about current applications that are pending? That's more litigation. So when you have a situation where you have all of the tax benefit, let's just assume for the sake of argument that's the primary benefit. Ancillary benefit, servicing a need. What if it all gets eaten up by the vagaries of trying to do it this way in what some would call, I know it's a 15-month process, but this particular floating zone amendment, my personal opinion is I think it could be vetted a little bit better. I know the project itself has been vetted very fully, it appears to be. I mean, people can debate the process, but at least the process has gone through. I'm not sure this particular process has been fully vetted. So those are my thoughts. I thank the board for its time.
Thank you.
I'm a short person also, but I'll just move it up a tiny bit. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and the board.
Welcome.
I'm going to hit on some other topic that wasn't touched upon. My name is John Strobel, 66 Maple Hill in Pleasantville. As we know, the project that's proposed here in an existing residential neighborhood, there's nothing similar to that in Westchester County, or in my research, nothing that Benchmark has similar on 3.5 acres in a residential zone. We asked Mr. Steinmetz and his group to get a professional consultant in here and say how that would affect home values. But they couldn't tell us because there's nothing else in Westchester that's like this. The nearest thing they came to is Belly Fair, which is on King Street in Rye. But that area, all the homes were built simultaneously. It wasn't put in an existing residential neighborhood. So we don't know how this is going to affect us because we have nothing to compare it with. In my research across most of the East Coast, I couldn't find anyone that was on 3.5 acres in a residential neighborhood. All assisted living facilities was either in a commercial neighborhood or huge sprawling grounds. Why is that? I don't have the answer why it is, but I think 15 months isn't a long time, and certainly to extend the public hearing longer than 2 weeks to make a decision is needed, because we don't have a benchmark to compare this to, because there is nothing here to do that for. Also, I think it's important, I did some research on Benchmark. Benchmark is an excellent company. They know how to manage assisted living facility. They do a great job on it. But they also own 95% by Healthcare REIT, who does the financing, who makes the decision on how the money is allocated. I think that's important to know. Does it make a difference? Maybe not. But it's never been brought up much, and no one talks about it. So I just wanted to bring that up. Benchmark also does an excellent job in purchasing new facilities. Their most recent one is Robbins Brook. That's somewhere in Massachusetts. Nice sprawling grounds. I looked at the picture today. It's a beautiful facility, but it is not like the one in Pleasantville. So Pleasantville is a totally different type of facility for them. I just want to bring that up for you to know. Also, one other thing is, I want to read the quote on how Benchmark determines where they're going to build their facilities. It says, John Dragat, is he still with Benchmark?
Yes.
Yes. He's quoted in a magazine on June 13th and says, developers say land is ripe for senior housing in the right places. And he was asked, how do you determine where to build a senior housing facility? And it says, one of the major factors Benchmark looks to is home ownership and home prices, not only among potential residents, but also qualified caregivers of adult children of potential residents. According to Benchmark's research, 75% of the community's residents come within a 5-mile radius. While the resident is senior, its decision-making is really the adult child. We look for concentrations of adult children who are 55 to 65 and maybe even older. So when they came to Pleasantville, I know you say there's a society need in Pleasantville, we have a great need, but they really looked at the makeup of the population of the children of the adults. Now, we have a lot of adult facilities going up. We have a beautiful one in Armagh, commercial area, right by 22 and 684. Very nice, large facility. There's a brand new one in White Plains, the Bristol, also on North Street. I think that one has a movie theater and a bowling alley inside. A very nice facility. One's being proposed in Mount Kisco. There's another one also that we have in down the Sawmill a little bit in, I forgot the community, but close by here also. So there are facilities around for the adult children that they're looking at. It doesn't have to be in Pleasantville in a residential neighborhood. Not that we don't want it here, we don't want it in a residential neighborhood. And I think it takes more than 2 weeks to make that decision. I know we talked about 15 months, but you all say your mind hasn't been made up, so you're really going to make your mind up in 2 weeks. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ellen Finn, 139 Skytop Drive, and I just want to, place a plea, as we heard from some other folks, to perhaps give a little bit more time for this deliberation. I think that my eyes have really been opened tonight. I've learned so much. I've heard, the gang from Maple Hill, what they've had to say, and I know that there's been an effort to communicate with them and to really get, on the same page for this. As far as I'm concerned on Skytop Drive, I don't think that I've had that same level of communication, but I feel responsible for making sure that I'm well informed, and tonight's meeting was really helpful. I did learn about it from the email from the homeowners group. Otherwise, I don't think I would have been here, so thank you for sending that. But we are very impacted by this as well. I was just thinking, up where we live, up on the hill, with 3 people in my family who drive, we probably make 30 trips a day by what will be the entrance of the facility. It's dramatically going to change our everyday life in Pleasantville. Going to the grocery store, going to school, going to pretty much every activity. We patronize everything in Pleasantville. I want to continue doing that without feeling like, oh darn, I've got to take a left here and deal with, the traffic or deal with something that we just don't know what it's going to be yet. So I just would like to see some more time put into it, because I think that there will be a rallying cry after this meeting, and I think you will be hearing a lot more from residents. So, thank you.
Thank you for that. I would also, not everyone has the stomach for these turgid reports, but there is a traffic report that's worth your look.
Absolutely.
And we'll make a link to that also.
I will do that.
It's up
When I
there
got
now,
the
but-
email today
Yeah.
from the group, I spent the day pretty much online trying to educate myself on the situation, and I did go onto the site, and it was just very hard to locate. You've said yourself, there's so much information there,
It's hard.
digging deep.
So-
I did a Google search, I read what I could. I ended up seeing things like a blueprint that didn't have the names of the street legible, so I couldn't even see the orientation of the building. So, I do think, yes, now we'll give the time, but it's very unclear where that information is being held, or that it exists at all.
It certainly exists, so we'll try to clean up those links. But certainly the 2 pieces that people have talked about a lot are the traffic piece and the potential locations. So we'll get both of those up in a clear link.
Thank you.
evening. I'm Richard Vestola. I live on 36 Green Meadow Road, which is right down the hill from St. Jude's, which I used to regard with a rather benign eye, but after tonight, I kind of think of it as a dormant volcano. So I'm a little concerned now. But I thought it might be helpful to give a little bit of a historical perspective, since I've been in the village since 1987, which is, 37 years, and I was on the Planning Commission for 6 years. When I first moved into the village, the office building across from Holy Innocents had just gone up. And the reaction of the board at that time and the Planning Commission was to go into emergency mode, and rather than have a floating designation to make more office buildings, they created a historical district, as you know, which stretches from the village right up to the old village, to preserve Bedford Road from being overdeveloped. I joined the Planning Commission in 1989 when the golf course was up for development. And that took over 2 years. So I can, believe me, I can sympathize with you, because that was 2 years of meetings till 2 o'clock in the morning. The day we finally closed that out, I went home and opened the best bottle of wine I had. It was like a nightmare. It was hard. But we didn't get a perfect resolution, but we were able to scale things back a little bit. And then there was the pool hall thing. If you remember the pool hall, another developer came in with well-spoken lawyers and nice pictures and emails that they ginned up from residents that they gave tricky questions to provide support to put in a video arcade in a pool hall where tutor time is. And that was the subject of much debate in the village, and everybody was involved, and there were meetings after meetings after meetings, because it was very controversial, and eventually that was turned down. That experience led to the development of the master plan. One of the reasons we got that office building across from Holy Innocents in the first place was that the zoning was defective, and there were loopholes, and there were ways that clever developers and lawyers could exploit it, and they got that office building put in. After the pool hall experience, we spent many, many years and a lot of money, and I was on that committee for about 3 years, to develop the master plan. And the thing about the master plan, now, my memory may be faulty, but it seems to me that the thing about the gold standard for the master plan, more than anything else, was to preserve the RRR districts, the residentially zoned districts. Because at the time, the impression was that Pleasantville was a residential village and was composed mostly of residents living in homes, not overly commercial. There were some commercial areas, but the RRR districts, of which, by the way, St. Jude's is one, were considered the gold standard. That's what the master plan was designed to protect, to prevent that from being assembled into large parcels or split into small parcels or built into this or built into that. It was really designed to preserve the character of Pleasantville, the residential character. And when we were on the Planning Commission, we did all kinds of things, as you know. I mean, 6-inch side yard setbacks for decks, plantings. The overwhelming, we had two ideas that overwhelmed everything else. One was the welfare and the preferences of Pleasantville residents were paramount. So, and I think there was somebody else who mentioned this earlier this evening, where if there was a change that was going to be made and neighbors objected for whatever reason, that was given credence. The idea was no financial detriment to the property owner, so you don't devalue and degrade their property by erecting something that's out of character right on top of them, and you don't set dangerous precedents. That was the other thing, because everything you did and everything we looked at always had precedents, and so you had to be very careful what you ruled on and what kind of you know this because you do this all the time. So when I hear this very clever idea for a floating district, it chills me to the marrow of my bones, because I'll tell you, I don't believe that any map you have is, if you can put a stake in the heart of the RRR zoning protection, then everything else is up for grabs. And so the fact that it's a half a mile distance, that means nothing to me. You just change it, make it a quarter of a mile, make it an eighth of a mile. It means nothing. Once RRR is dead and is no longer protected, everything else, to my mind, everything else is up for grabs. Everything. So you've just changed the character of Pleasantville. And I have to say, if that's what you're thinking of doing, I really think that this is so important to everybody who lives in Pleasantville that you should have this as not as a vote just by the board. You should have this as a referendum, and it should be, it should be explained to everybody. Everybody should know the pros. Everybody should know the cons. Everybody should know what's at stake. You know, are you going to really sacrifice the character of Pleasantville for a couple of dollars in tax revenue? If that's what you want to do, people should be allowed to vote on it. All the people who bought houses here thinking they were buying one thing and are now going to be stuck with something else should have a chance to vote. So I really think a referendum is the only way to go. Because Pleasantville, I see Pleasantville as being fragile. I've always thought of it that way. It's not a big village. It's only about 1.7 miles across. I think there's 1,700 homes, I think, in the village. I know because I knocked on the door of every one when I ran for trustee in 1991. So that's really what I'm trying to suggest, is that this proposal is so inappropriate. This idea of the floating zone is so clever as it may be to your purposes. It's really the most pernicious thing I've ever heard. You might as well take the master plan and just flick it, because I'm like speechless. It stuns me that this could. I mean, I took it as a joke when I first read about it a year ago. I thought, why even bother with this? This will never have a chance of passing. So I'm really, really kind of stunned by that. So, without taking up too much time, I just want to say that that I really think. I mean, I know you've worked hard on this, and you're probably sick to death of it. But this is so important. I mean, and really, if you make the wrong decision here, in my opinion, you're going to kill Pleasantville. And to the lady with the dogs, I don't know your name, you know, people don't only leave Pleasantville because when they get 85 years old, they have no place to go. They leave Pleasantville because they're driven out, because the character of the village changes, and they feel they're no longer welcome there, their values are not shared with everybody else's values, and they go someplace else, someplace that's a little more bucolic, a little less commercial, a little more residential. There's other reasons to leave than if I make it to 85, I'll be happy to live anywhere, believe me. So I just wanted to say that, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. We still have a few more.
Hi, I'm Joyce Poller. I live at 58 Maple Hill, and I just have a plea to all of you. I could see you took serious offense when some of my neighbors, as good meaning as they were, said things to you that you took very personally. There's a lot of emotion in this room. We feel very strongly about this. Please don't take it personally. We are trying to defend our homes. And so we know that you all work very hard. We know that you all We hope that you all have our best interests at heart. We hope that you have not made up your minds yet. We hope that you're listening to us. And we're just asking that you listen to what we have to say, and please keep this in mind. That's all we're saying. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Mary Gregorius, and I am the rector at St. John's Episcopal Church. I live at 378 Bedford Road. It feels tonight as though there are three very distinct conversations going on. One, what's happening to the character of Pleasantville. The second is, what about Benchmark? What will they do with us? What will this assisted living center mean to us? And the third thing is the zoning change. I'm really not equipped to speak to zoning changes. What I would like to address is the concept that you have to move when you get old because you can no longer stay in your home and there's no place for you to stay in the community. You referenced the fact that Benchmark did their due diligence when they looked for adult children who are looking after their own children and also trying to look after their parents, and driving to Pennsylvania or Massachusetts in order to do so.
and being unable to keep good care of their parents and good care of their children at the same time. It is a concern for those of us that are stuck in the middle. Having our parents closer to us would make it easier for us to look after them. The Methodist Church is concerned with their mission and their ministry in the world. They are not looking to upset the character or change the residential neighborhood. They are thinking about how do we be church? How do we be God's people in this day and age, in this community, and with the property and the only resources that we have? They are not looking to make enemies of their neighbors. They are looking actually to supply services and resources for their neighbors. Does the character of Pleasantville change in a negative way because we allow space for people to grow old in place, for people to be among us? I don't think that that changes our character negatively. I grew up in Newburgh, New York, and what most of you know about Newburgh, New York is probably that the gangs tear it apart from one side to the other. That is not my memory of Newburgh, New York. I remember when Newburgh, New York was voted one of the great all-American cities. But they also decided to be static. They also decided that they were not going to change anything. They wanted to be residential. They didn't want to have businesses. So when IBM came knocking at the door, they said, go to Poughkeepsie. We all know where Newburgh is now. Now, I'm not saying that Pleasantville will become the next Newburgh. What I am saying is nothing is so constant as change. So if change is coming, if change is in our overall best interest for our community at large, then we must demand of those who are coming in to do business that they do so ethically, morally, and with great responsibility. In my case, in Pastor Suhi's case, that they also do so in keeping with the mission and ministry that we have been prescribed with. So I won't speak to the zoning. There have been many, many really good points raised here this evening, many good issues that do need to be addressed. I hope that they will be addressed. I do think that your conscientiousness has been greatly appreciated, and that there are all kinds of questions yet to be answered about the zoning. And yes, you do have to take great care with any change you make in a village. But none of us has a crystal ball, and master plans were described and prescribed by men and women, and therefore frequently inadequate. They couldn't read the future. There is a great need for assisted living. And I would hope that we can find a way for all things to come together. Thank you.
Thank you. Sure.
I'm sorry, I just have to go up again, because now I'm agitated. Now that we've played the religious card, I just want to say that nobody here is objecting to assisted living in Pleasantville. They're just objecting to it in a residential area, which goes at the heart of what Pleasantville is, which is a residential community. I think it's the height of hypocrisy to get up here and talk about being good neighbors and having a ministry when after all the years you've lived next to these people, you stick a knife in them and drop this monstrosity in their backyard. And I'll just remind you, since I went to Catholic school, and I'm fairly well versed in all of this, to my knowledge, the only time that Jesus showed anger in the Bible was when he drove the money lenders out of the temple, and he drove them out with a whip. So that's one thing you want to think about. And the other thing is, the only sinners that I'm aware of.
Can we stick to the
the most
subject there?
contempt for
We're not here.
Well, you're going to play the religious
Richard,
card.
we're not here to sermonize. Please.
I'm sorry. That just it's.
Please.
It's
I understand your point.
Well, that's all I have to say.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm just going to say one more comment. John Strobel, 66 Maple Hill. I didn't want to bring this up before, but since it was brought up on the need for senior living in Pleasantville, let's use the numbers that we heard from Mr. Steinmetz and his associates here. $8,000 a month per person. So if you're living there for 1 year, that's $96,000 per person. 2 people, you multiply it by 2, almost $200,000. But that's just living expenses. That's your food, to sleep there, to do a little recreation, but that's not doctor care. I have a mother who's 84 years old. You see the doctor, you take medications. That could cost you another $50,000 a year. So now you're almost, for 2 people, $250,000. I don't know, maybe everybody in this room is in that kind of boat, but I don't think I am. I couldn't have my mother live there. Maybe you can, but I couldn't. So let's look at what they're really trying to provide for the community. It's not for everybody in this community. It's for the people who live in the surrounding neighborhoods, too, that are earning considerably more than the median income in Pleasantville. Thank you.
If I may be permitted another 5
Hold on, we've got somebody who hasn't spoken yet.
Good evening. I'm Teresa Scucciamari. I live at 65 Maple Hill. When we first started with this project, we went back and I heard the word changed. And this is the second time, and it kind of impelled me to get up to speak. I came to Pleasantville 17 years ago for change. I lived in the city. The houses were close to one another. I wanted a town with the little white picket fence with my family, and I thought, gee, this is a nice, quaint town. And I see more and more people, more traffic, more people getting upset over all the commercial things coming, and they say, well, we want change. I want to change. I want to change from living on top of people. I wanted to live on Maple Hill, where I live, where people say to me, oh, you live on that beautiful block, Maple Hill. I really want to think about if someone wanted to buy my house now and they saw this big monstrosity at the bottom of my hill, I want to know that my property value is going to be the same. I don't think so.
Another tape change? Yes. Okay, brief tape change.
Once again,
Welcome back. Brief tape break.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Go ahead,
say
Bill.
that. Once again, I'm Bill Stoller from 69 Maple Hill, and I'd like to point out that the person who just spoke, Scucciamari, Marie Scucciamari, Teresa Scucciamari, excuse me, is my next door neighbor, and hers is the property that is right on top of, she didn't say so, but hers is the property that is right next to Benchmark, directly. If you go maybe 20 feet from her back porch, that's going to be Benchmark's property. That's how close Benchmark comes to her. It's very, very close. It's exactly. So you can see the space, and she will see the fence, and she will see the building, and she will see the roof, and she will hear the traffic, and she will hear the HVAC system, and she is going to be one of the most impacted by this. And I mention it because she didn't, but I know you do want it mentioned.
Yeah,
so
I do. Thank you.
Okay. I want to say just a couple of things, in addition to what I had said before, based on what some people had said. One of the things that somebody said to me as we were sitting down is that we were talking about the need for housing for seniors, for these, well, super seniors. I'm a senior. I don't look it, but I qualify as a senior citizen under the strict definition of it. But we're talking about people who are 85, 86, or older, or at least in their 80s. And as if they're not being served here, that we need a facility that will serve them here. Well, I think we all know the truth of the matter is that there are many, many people in their 80s who still reside in Pleasantville. Now, maybe they've downsized from single-family homes into, say, Foxwood. Foxwood is full of seniors in their 80s and older, and they live there. It is practically a retirement village in Foxwood. Not everyone there, but it is very heavily populated by people who are older.
Now you're going to get yourself in trouble.
Oh, I'm not getting in trouble. Eileen, am I correct? Am I correct?
Not everyone there.
No, not everyone there. That it's
All right,
heavily,
let's stay on
that it's
track.
heavily populated.
Let's stay on
by-
track, please.
That it's
Come on.
heavily populated.
Come on, it's
right?
getting late. Let's keep going.
A substantial senior population.
Then there's the younger
All right,
senior
stop.
population.
Come on, keep going.
not going to argue about it. But the fact of the matter is that throughout the village, in many places, including Foxwood, there is a substantial senior population, people who are living in smaller places than they used to live. They've downsized their home, they've sold their homes or whatever, but they want to stay in Pleasantville. And Pleasantville is a great place for them, because in Pleasantville, and this is something that we haven't mentioned recently, we have a senior center. We have a whole, I don't know what section of government we call it, a whole division, a whole section.
Your village government.
Village government.
Right,
But
we do it.
There's a part of village government that looks out for the seniors. There is a senior center where some people are lucky enough to live. But that senior center also coordinates many other activities for these people who may not be able to get out on their own, maybe not be able to do their own cooking. There's a hot meal, right? Every day at lunch.
I don't want to short circuit you, but we have senior outreach programs, we have a Meals on Wheels
We have
program.
many things.
We have a lot of support programs, and I can tell you because I and my colleagues know these stories in ways that nobody.
Peter, I'm not saying it. Tell
Please
you this.
stop, Bill.
I'm not going to say this. I know you know.
We
this.
know these stories in ways that the rest of the community doesn't, about seniors who very, very, very much want to stay in the village of Pleasantville and who are living in conditions that place them at risk because the desire to stay in Pleasantville exceeds the everything else. And so I don't mean to suggest that we can solve all problems for all people. Clearly we can't. We're not trying to. But I do want you to know that I take what I do here, and all of us take what we do here pretty seriously, in part because the human stories behind every one of these issues, all of your issues, the issues of seniors, the issues of kids in trouble, the issues of kids who are succeeding, they are tremendously personal. There are moments, I think, that I can't be exposed to so much stuff. I just have to block it off for a day. In the end, it's energizing and satisfying, and you feel as though maybe you're going to leave the world a little better than you found it. But that's what drives us, and I want you to know that the idea that the seniors in this community are well served is true only to an extent, and I can tell you that I've heard with passion, with some tears, that the missing piece is the approaching end of life. So that's on the radar screen too. That doesn't mean we should say yes, but it's on the radar screen.
I was not saying this to in any way imply that you or any other member of the board is not aware of the efforts of the village.
I don't mean
this is a public hearing.
I don't want that to seem like...
And I want to make sure that the public understands that there are many services that the village provides.
There are, yes.
To our seniors and to seniors who have difficulty getting around. People can stay in their apartments or their homes. Medicare, Medicaid provides some home health aides. There are ways to exist in Pleasantville as a challenged elder without the necessity for an 87-unit large facility put in a residential area. When you talk about end-of-life issues, they're not really dealing with end-of-life issues. They're dealing with the part before the end of life. Because when people get closer to it and need much more medical assistance that an assisted living can provide.
It is not a nursing home, absolutely.
They will be going to a nursing home.
No doubt.
They will be going to a nursing home. So we're not talking about end-of-life care. We're talking about that.
We're talking about the
range.
point at which you need help available to you 24/7.
Exactly.
And that is an extremely tough time, as you know.
My father-in-law's one of those.
So there it is.
Okay, but I just wanted to put on the record that when speakers have come up here and said things, and unfortunately they were both the pastors, and I don't mean to make a religious argument here at all, talking about taking care of our seniors, of those in need. The fact of the matter is, we do, to the extent that the village is able to. Yes, we already do, and that providing a large-scale facility is not necessarily necessary for that. And our main objection from me, from my neighbors, from many of the people who spoke here today, is the location of this facility in what has been a totally residential area. So let me get to part number 2, very brief, which is that all these months you've heard from mostly the same people. You've heard from me. You've heard from John. You've heard from Yuri. You've heard from Eileen. You've heard from us over and over again and telling you more or less the same thing we've been telling you for the last 15 months, right? But tonight, you heard from some other people, some people who didn't live on Maple Hill or Bedford Road or in Foxwood, people who live other parts of the village who really weren't aware of exactly what was going on here. They had they heard vaguely something about an assisted living. They heard vaguely
it's
about.
Getting late. Could you get to your point?
I'm getting to my point.
Yeah.
They heard vaguely about a floating zone.
Yeah.
But until now, they didn't put it all together. And that's why there are people here who have never been here before who are asking questions. And that's why what several people have said to you before, I would like to say, I endorse, is that the village has the capacity through email and regular mail to reach out to everyone and say, this is what we're proposing. This is something that not only is a project that's going to affect a neighborhood, this is a project that is going to affect the entire village by its character. And I think it is incumbent upon the board to let everybody know about that. I know you've been on PCTV. I know there have been articles in local newspapers. I don't know how much people watch PCTV or read the papers, but making a direct notice to all these people and then scheduling at least another hearing where those people can express their opinions pro and con. If there are 90 people who are for it, let some of those people get up here and say so. If there are more people who are against it,
I just want to be
say.
clear, people are entitled to comment in whatever form they wish, written or
Right.
oral. So
But I do think that
you don't have to show up at the podium if you prefer to respond in writing. So.
right. But I think there might have been more people here because a lot of people found out about this for the first time.
Okay, so I understand your point.
On Friday.
I
and
understand
here
your
it is
point.
Monday.
I got it. I understand.
So I throw that out
Okay.
as something we should consider. Thank you.
Any other speakers?
With the call.
All right. You speak, and then we'll go to, or do we have callers who are probably waiting?
I had to disconnect.
Okay. All right.
Andrew Layden, 41st Summit
Yeah.
Place. I honestly don't have anything particularly new to add other than to reiterate everything that people have said about the changing character of the village, the inappropriateness of this facility in this residential area, and the need for more discussion. I personally put together an email that went out Friday to a large number of people, and the response I got from people who were not aware of what was going on was staggering. And the increased interest in the website that I put together was staggering. We had a petition on there that was about 150 people or so, and over the weekend, another 50 people immediately signed on to it for additional notice. I think people don't know what's going on, and I think people do need more time to speak. As you can see here, the room itself started out particularly full at the start of the night, but now it's emptied out because people just can't stay that long. It's a very long night, and to try to accomplish this all in one night, even callers on the phone probably have given up at this point getting a chance to speak because it's getting very late. So I think there's a good reason to extend this process out to allow more time for public comment, and there's no need to rush to a vote this quickly. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other speakers here? Or shall we, if there are, reconnect the phone? Judy, are you back? All right, go ahead, but let me just announce, if you're watching at home and you're still with us,
Judy, are we reconnected?
769-1677 would be happy to take your calls. If you have run out of steam, you can contact the Village Hall or send an email. The emails are on the website, and we'll be happy to add that to the record. Welcome back.
Thank you. Matt Finkelstein, 11 Gramerton Road. It's an informational question. There was some discussion earlier today about the need for affordable housing, and it was read into the record by you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to fully understand that because it was sort of a requirement to read it into the record, but I didn't quite understand. There was a question about Scarsdale.
The short version is that we got this response back from the county planning people that indicated they expected that 10% of the housing units would be set aside as compliant with the fair and affordable housing settlement that the county's a party of.
And which we have a 10% set aside as far as our model ordinance is concerned.
We have that ordinance in our zoning code. It is our belief, and it is also now ratified by county planning, that that would not capture this project just because it doesn't make sense to do so. These are not homes that people move into and live independently. The rent associated with these apartments is part and parcel of 24/7 services, your food, your utilities, the services they provide, etc. County planning agreed that there are many such circumstances, this being one of them, where a set-aside for affordable housing creates an impossible situation and such a massive subsidy that it's unworkable.
Okay, just as a follow-up to that, people have raised concerns about the affordability of the Pleasantville residents to be actually be able to afford to stay at this benchmark facility. Has the board given any consideration to contingencies for allotments of that sort, where it'd be more for a certain percentage be set aside as a condition?
We have not, as you will read in the, and probably already have, in the floating zone text. It provides a preference for Pleasantville residents to live there, but at whatever the rates are charged by benchmark. We are not inclined to be monkeying with the free market in that respect. And I realize that it's obvious that senior assisted living is a very expensive business. I can tell you from my own experience, and I'm sure many others, that providing 24/7 support for an elderly relative is an expensive business, no matter how you do it. And you know, the reality, of course, is that in environments like this, there are a significant number of elderly people who have an asset base from a house that allows them to live in a place like this for a short period of time. The average tenancy, I think, in Benchmark's projects is relatively short. You don't have people living there typically for 10 years.
Okay. So, with respect to the county planning board, it was some sort of advisory opinion that was sought?
Well, we're required, anytime we have a proposed zoning change, to refer it to the county for their comment. And so that's a standard practice that goes on with all communities. We got back this letter today that included the suggestion that there would be a 10% set aside. We queried the county planning commissioner, and he responded with a follow-up letter to say, didn't mean to say that this project necessarily had to be that way, and we understand, but believe you should simply clarify on the record the reasons why it wouldn't.
So in other words, this project is not anticipated to increase the allotment that would have to be apportioned somewhere else in Pleasantville? Is
No,
that the thought?
the affordable housing settlement does not have a specific allotment to every community. You know, there's a discussion within the county about various studies that have said, if here's the overall county need for affordable housing, here's how it might be served. But the settlement requires 750 units in the communities that are identified in the settlement, but it doesn't say you have to have 10 and you have to have 14 and you have to have 50. So there isn't any quota for the village of Pleasantville, and indeed it doesn't really engage the question of assisted living, which really makes no sense anyway.
It doesn't apply
I mean,
to it at
you
all.
you have to, you know, these affordable housing units are made available to people at 80% or below of the average median income. In the case of senior assisted living, you're getting all kinds of services in addition to a place to live. So I think
we have the 10% set aside at Toll Brothers, the development at Toll Brothers. So it'll be a 10% set aside there. That's the ordinance that we have now.
10% of those units will.
Right.
will
What
be-
I want to make
right.
sure is that none of the residents of Benchmark would then be counted against some sort of pro rata allocation.
No, there's no
Doesn't
allocation.
apply.
Right.
Does not apply.
And if there were any HUD lawsuits that came out of
No.
that,
They can.
the county planning board has that jurisdiction, is what you're saying? Or-
No, they don't
doesn't
even have that
apply.
jurisdiction. I mean, the county is required to foster or engender the creation of these 750 housing units. But
And-
by our code, these aren't even housing units. They don't have a full kitchen. You know, these are essentially apartments with a limited kitchen because, for reasons of safety and reasons of the social community, those residents all come together. So
A large percentage of those 751 units, very few encompass seniors or workforce housing or anything like that.
Okay.
It's not in the
Okay.
settlement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, again, if anyone's still with us and wanted to call 769-1677, there are lots of opportunities to continue. Anybody else want anything? And we probably exhausted ourselves. I just want to thank you all for your thoughtful comments and thank those of you who've hung on till 11:20. Yeoman service, gold stars to be delivered to all. To be continued. Do you have anything you wanted to add?
Just very briefly.
Okay. Very briefly.
Understood.
Promise?
I just wanted to hit that notice issue one more time and speak to the floating zone very briefly in response to what the neighbors have raised. On the notice, I just want to make sure the village is clear. It's our understanding that the notice that went out was proper. We still have not had a chance to review it. I'm happy to confer with Mr. Sachs, with your village clerk, with your village manager. If in fact there is a need for a further notice to go out, we would have no objection to doing that. Again, our understanding was that we were coming tonight for two purposes, and at a minimum, Mr. Mayor, members of the board, we would ask that the public hearing on the draft text, the proposed text in connection with the petition, be closed tonight. And though I respect the public and the plea that many made to keep it open, I want to remind your board that respectfully, we did sit here cooperatively and patiently throughout a 15-month process where you did effectively conduct a constant public hearing. We could have come to the microphone and objected and said, procedurally, it's not proper. This isn't that. If you want to do this, then let's notice it as a public hearing so that I could stand here tonight and claim that the public has had 15 months of a public hearing. We didn't do that.
Wouldn't have gotten you anywhere.
It's good to know, Mr. Mayor. It's good to know. I appreciate the candor. As far as the floating zone, and this is the one thing that I really feel is important, a couple of people have spoken, and for some of the non-lawyers, it may seem like some kind of particularly interesting or novel or unique thing is going on. And there was a mention earlier, it was almost like a backhanded negative mention about Tarrytown, and I couldn't figure out why that was made, and then I realized they were referring to Rogers versus the Village of Tarrytown. 1951, the New York State Court of Appeals ruled that floating zones are a lawful exercise of a municipality. More recently, in 2012, literally after we filed our petition here, a court here in New York State again took up the issue. And the reason it's important, on day one, this board raised with me and with Mr. Sachs concerns about spot zoning, and some of the perceptive people here raised that tonight. You were all, I want the record clear, and no one should disparage you in this regard, you were all over this issue on day one. You were extraordinarily concerned about spot zoning, and it goes to the whole notice issue. We could have come in and we could have proposed a special permit to drop into the RRR zone. Here's the RR zone. We're now going to have a special permit in this zone that allows assisted living. If that were to happen, every property in the village in the RR zone would have been susceptible to this type of use. Instead, we said, well, let's look at this property. We could create a specific zone just for this property. That would be classic spot zoning, singling out this particular property. Instead, what we did is what the Court of Appeals looked at in 1951 and what the Third Department in Highview Estates versus the town of Montgomery did in December of 2012. We crafted, or we proposed crafting, a zone for the village of Pleasantville that allows for this unique use, that acknowledges its importance, and then gives you the power how to implement it. And that's where the notice issue comes in. The reason that our team, and we feel we've been extraordinarily cooperative and open with the public, we don't feel the public has been shut out in any way, is because if you were to adopt this zoning district gets adopted, and then you have a separate determination about dropping that zone onto this particular property. Any other property in the village that would seek to have this in the future, and we heard some of the fear stories that came up about other properties in the village and people don't really know about it. According to the Highview Estates case, which we referenced and we briefed for Joel over a year ago, they would be subject to a comprehensive SEQA review, and that's what's unique about floating zones. Floating zones do not require an applicant like Benchmark to come before the village and study comprehensively every single property in the village. We can identify them, but we don't have to go through SEQA on all those properties. Likewise, we don't have to provide any kind of detailed notice to all of those properties. In the event those properties were ultimately subject to an application to map, they'd be here, just like we were here, subject to a full process, subject to SEQA, and subject to whatever notice requirements your board and your officials decide at that point in time is appropriate. So here, just in conclusion, my understanding is that you gave the notice that went out to the surrounding neighbors on Maple Hill because of the mapping aspect of this, because of the aspect that Benchmark is seeking to apply not only to have a new zone created, but to have it apply to this very piece of property. That's why those neighbors got written notice. Again, you'd have to confer with your clerk and your village manager because the applicant did not handle the notice here. We believe in sum that you have conducted an extraordinarily comprehensive public hearing on this, that everyone has had a full and fair opportunity to be heard, and to keep this open at this point serves no fundamental, fair, or necessary purpose. We'd ask you to close the public hearing tonight. I would definitely suggest that we reserve on the issue of the mapping question because I want the opportunity to confer with your staff. And if, in fact, it needs to be noticed as a separate hearing, there's more than adequate time under your 10-day rule for that notice to go out. Notice for this hearing, as I understand it, was published appropriately. And whether or not it was posted on your website, again, is an internal ministerial issue that the applicant had no control over. Please don't penalize my client because of what may or may not have occurred in some of the notification requirements.
And in the scenario that we were, for example, to notice a mapping hearing for 2 weeks and hold open the zoning hearing for 2 weeks, how does that aggrieve your client?
If you want to open up the public hearing and we're going to sit and have the public hearing open and we're going to go back through everything we did again tonight?
I'm not necessarily saying that, but I'm just saying, I mean, I hear you, I understand you. Our purpose in all of this has been, as I have said many times, to be as fair as we can, to be as transparent as we can, but to get to a fair and reasonable answer as quickly as we can.
So let me
well, stop.
Mr. Mayor, I think if you renoticed this again for a meeting in 2 weeks, and so any objections that were raised about that the public notice did not refer to the zoning map change as well as a text change, we could have another combined hearing on the text and on the map change, and rather than having to hear everybody repeat what they said previously about the zoning text, you could just incorporate
all of which
their
is already on the
comments
record
into the public hearing, let's say in 2 weeks. So I don't see how there'd really be any prejudice.
I think that's a perfectly fine and creative suggestion. With the one, I want to respond to what I started to say, and I interrupted you. You tried stopping me, and then Joel bailed me out by answering and interrupting you.
All right, let's diagram that.
Please don't. It's too late. Please don't. It would be, Mr. Mayor, the only objection that my client would have to holding it over and reopening on the 24th would be if this board were going to then use that to argue on the 24th. Because we ended up having a doubleheader hearing on tonight, March 24th, we're no longer in a position to vote tonight. In my opinion, with all due respect to the board and the public, if we do what Joel is suggesting, we're doing it because we're good, cautious lawyers, and you're good, cautious legislators, and we want to have an airtight record, and that's fine. I don't want Mr. Scarsdad, Trustee Scarsdad, who has sat for 15 months, and you started tonight, Mr. Mayor, by telling all of us that it was a goal, and it's a laudable goal when you've spent blood, sweat, tears, aggravation, reading time, and energy on a matter, to then be precluded from ultimately voting on it. And let's call it what it is. The gentleman, as a legislator here in the community, deserves the opportunity to vote on it. My client has an expectation and a desire, up or down, good news or bad news, that we ultimately get to a vote. We've put an awful lot in, and if you had not adopted a neg deck in January, I'd be in a very different procedural standpoint. You have already, as a board, determined by unanimous vote that there are no significant adverse environmental impacts associated with either the creation of this zone or the implementation and mapping of this zone. I get the procedure, but I get the substance. And the substance is you've already made a critical finding under the law. To do otherwise at this point would be disregarding it. So if Joel is recommending that we...
Do you mean to say because we voted that way on the secret that we have to vote yes?
You know what?
On the zoning? Is that where you're headed?
Mr. Mayor, if nothing has been identified in the public hearing to identify some kind of inconsistency or fallacy, I think you'd be quite hard-pressed to do otherwise. But I'll leave you to...
Well, I thank you for that legal advice, David. We'll stick with our guy. I think it makes sense for us to notice a continuation of this hearing and a specific notice for the mapping on the 24th. Right. We do have the goal, as we started out with, that a board that's been with this be the board that votes on it. And we obviously have some options other than the 24th if we didn't feel we were finished by then to call a special meeting to do that. But as I also said at the outset, it's our obligation as well as our right to ingest that which we have heard and to feel as though we have acted fairly and reasonably in the context of all the information that has come to us. So I think we've moved pretty efficiently with your help. You've been absolutely cooperative as you described yourself, and we appreciate it, as has Benchmark. But I think that's a logical step for us to take. So we should add a resolution tonight to hold open this public hearing. We'll adjourn it but not close it.
Can I ask one question?
I think it should be re-noticed again so there's no question raised as to what the subject of the hearing. So would you recommend
closing this and then opening a new hearing? Or adjourning this?
I would adjourn this one, but call for a new one, and then you can incorporate everything that was said at this hearing
and
tonight.
that is certainly our intent.
And one add-on, Joel, tell me if you disagree.
Yes.
Because I don't want the public to be precluded from submitting written comments, and they've been told tonight on the record that they can, I think the board should make it clear that written comments need to be received by this board and you need to set a date, because otherwise you run the risk that people on the 24th come in and say, oh, I thought I was going to have a 10-day written comment period at the close of tonight, March 24th hearing.
So
the rush. This is our lives we're talking about.
So we'll consider that matter.
There's nothing, and I just want the record to be clear, there's nothing that precludes you, unlike SECRA that has a written comment period that holds over beyond the close of a DEIS public hearing. Your village board under New York State law, your public hearing under New York State village law would not have a mandated 10-day public written comment period.
I understand the little. That's not a matter we have to decide tonight.
There's one other issue which a number of residents brought up tonight, which, again, I mean, I understand what they're saying, but I don't think that they were required to be noticed. We're talking about these 2 or 3 other potential sites for the EC overlay district to be located in the village. As I understand it, some of these people got up tonight and they basically said that even though we're nowhere near the Benchmark site, we are in close proximity to another one of these potential sites that are on this map that was referenced, this October map. There is no, in my opinion, legal requirement to notify those residents who are within 500 feet of those other potential sites until such time as, if ever, an applicant comes in and makes an application to locate an EC overlay floating zone on any of those parcels. However, if you, in your discretion, still feel that you want to notify those other residents who are within 500 feet of other potential sites, you can do that. It's up to you, but it's not required.
Okay, so we'll take that for a matter for discussion too. So we will add, with everyone's agreement, we'll adjourn this hearing, carry it over to the 24th, and also notice a hearing specifically on the subject of the remapping at the Benchmark site, also for the 24th. So. Last shot. It's time to finish off here.
No, if you're
Understood.
gonna
Yes.
renotice, this renotice
Yeah.
that you're sending out, I would request, for the sake of other village residents, that it be made more clear than what was in the email on March 7th. Because I think having in parentheses benchmark project
Yeah, we will, I assure
after
you.
the floating thing is very misleading. I think it was misleading. I think most people thought it related directly to the Maple Hill project. I do not think it was clear that this was a zoning amendment.
Okay, you made your point. Understood.
Right,
I hear you.
but you're not speaking to my point when you say that you're going to renotice it to a mapping. I'm not confident that this renoticing.
I'm not.
And I don't
we're
really
gonna,
feel like knocking on everybody's
okay,
door.
we're going to
and
have to look at it.
doing
I'm
what
not.
I feel is morally right. I want my
Joan.
board to do what is right.
Joan.
Come on.
Believe me, we want to do what's right too. Okay. Thank you, David. Did you have anything more?
No.
Okay. I think it's time for the resolutions, most of which are boring and unrelated. But for those of you who are leaving now, as mentioned, we're going to adjourn this hearing. We're going to notice another hearing on the mapping for the 24th.
And are you going to notice the people within the distance of the other person?
Have not decided that yet.
When will you decide that?
We got to talk to Joel and we'll decide it soon. Obviously, we have to decide it soon in order to make that notice. So,
See you on the 24th.
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
So I just need a motion to adjourn this.
A motion to
So
adjourn
moved.
the public hearing until March 24th.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then, Joel, we should add a resolution here to notice a public hearing.
To schedule a new public hearing on both the zoning text as well as the proposed zoning map change for the proposed benchmark.
Isn't the zoning text
property.
piece the carryover?
Yes, that's carryover.
Okay.
But it's better if we have one notice that
Okay.
clearly says there's a zoning text amendment and there's a zoning map amendment.
Okay.
Why don't we move that right now?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so that's going to be...
As per your wording.
Yes.
That will be resolution 47, right?
Resolve the pre-check registered.
But let's
Hold on,
vote on it
let's
now.
get 47, we'll get this one done. So, is there a motion to notice a public hearing?
To schedule a public hearing on the on a zoning text amendment to create an EC floating district in the village of Pleasantville, as well as a public hearing for a zoning map amendment to apply the EC district to a particular parcel of land, which is a parcel of land that is under contract now to benchmark, which I believe is section 99.15, block 3, lot 67.
Okay,
Portion of.
So Judy, you'll clean that language up.
what he
and-
said.
Right.
Who's the mover?
Jonathan, I seconded.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so that was resolution 46. Now we'll circle back to 41, colleague.
That was 47.
I'm sorry, 47, right.
Resolve that pre-check register dated March 10, 2014, covering pre-check numbers 77398 through 77484 and electronic check numbers 1333 through 1381 have been reviewed and they are hereby approved as listed below. These numbers are going to change because of a voided check. From the general fund, $244,027.27. From the water fund, $42,206. From the capital fund, $16,762. From the refuse fund, $34,42. From the pool fund, $718, totaling $307,156.45.
And which is the voided check?
Voided check was to Verizon. It was a check for $1,400.63. It needed to be broken up into a couple of pieces, and they sent one check in total, and they needed to void it to reissue.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved, 42.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees has reviewed the minutes of the meeting held on Monday, February 24th, 2014, and they are hereby approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments or corrections on the minutes?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, Jonathan, 40.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the following budget amendment, appropriating general fund balance, the transfer to the capital for the senior center vehicle of $46,853.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a senior center vehicle that has been around for about 10 years and is causing us lots of problems and is extremely difficult to fix. We are buying a new one and one that provides better access. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Ryan.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby appoints Joseph Stargiotti to the Planning Commission effective March 10th, 2014, to fill the unexpired term of Malcolm Netburn, said appointment to expire April 2015.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Joe, for agreeing to join the Planning Commission. Malcolm
you,
Netburn,
Malcolm.
who had been briefly a member, returning to the Planning Commission after many years, moved somewhat unexpectedly out of the village and is no longer eligible. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved.
Whereas sealed bids were advertised in the official village newspaper and received on March 3, 2014 for the pool building renovation project as follows. Bidder Foremost Development, the amount of $779,400. And whereas, after review of the bid, the Board of Trustees has determined that the bid is not in the best interest of the village. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby rejects the bid from Foremost Development, 37 Old Albany Post Road, Ossining, New York, and authorizes the rebid of said project.
Is there a second?
Second.
We received a single bid to a project that we believe is worth far less than this. And one of our problems is the project isn't big enough to attract the interest of some of the bidders who are within the pool that put up with the bonding and the like. So we are revisiting that. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved.
All right. This is a motion to authorize the insurance of refunding bonds not to exceed $3 million to refund certain outstanding serial bonds of the Village of Pleasantville and providing for other matters in connection therewith, as stated within the record, which is a number of pages. I'm just trying to get to the end. I guess, so therefore be it resolved that
It
stated
goes on
within the,
forever.
whatever,
Right.
goes on for about 30 pages of stuff that we,
Right. Is there a second?
Second.
So this is, the village is taking advantage of an opportunity to refund a number of existing bonds at a more favorable rate. I think we can
Refund.
save about, what,
Refi.
$89,000 or something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
around 90 grand.
Not a massive saving, but certainly a significant one and worth doing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Okay, we've already done the last one, which is 47. Motion,
bring it home.
motion to adjourn the meeting.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
If you're still with us, thank you. We will see you in 2 weeks. We have a work session in 1 week. Good night.